let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Josh, could you please take roll? Alrighty, thank you, Josh. Well, everybody, welcome back to our second day of meetings here at the campus of the university. And we have a slight change to our schedule for this morning. We've been honored to have the interim president of the university here. So please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how things are going here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for working so late last night. I was in contact with various people, and I know your tour went late, and hopefully you found that informative and useful for your deliberations. I'm Neil Theobald, and I'm the acting president of the university. I'm also the chief financial officer of the university, so I wear two hats, but I'm spending the year also acting as president. Welcome to the University of Wyoming. Later this morning you will hear from Dean Rasco, so I will leave most of the details of the College of Agriculture to her, but I wanted to give you an overview of more generally where we are as a university. Barb and I have worked together now for 10 weeks, and I think there's really been a three-pronged approach we've focused on with the College of Ag. First are the extension programs across the state. Second is the Department of Animal Science, and third is our veterinary science offerings. And the way that a president and a central administration gets involved.
Mr. President, real quick, I hate to interrupt.
Sure, please. So we're going to turn that down?
Okay.
I wonder if, did that help? I've got a little dial, little buttons here. Does that work better? Okay. So the way that a university president gets involved in improving a college is through the allocation of faculty. I sign off on who we hire. So we are within about a week of, are you going to switch me? Okay.
That one squeaks left.
Is that, okay, I'll move a little bit here. We're within about a week, is that working? Yep, okay. We're within about a week of announcing the faculty searches, but I can certainly indicate my number one priority in the allocation. We'll hire, somewhere in the range of 50 faculty over the course of the next year. All those searches are approved now, and they will all start July 1 of next year. In those 50 faculty searches, clearly the number one priority has been the College of Agriculture in rebuilding their offerings. There certainly will be several hirings in our extension directors and extension educators. At very much towards the top of my list is a senior faculty member, a senior professor in animal sciences who would serve as department chair. Senior faculty member, senior professor in veterinary sciences, who would also serve as department chair. And then there will be several additional mid-level faculty in fields such as animal sciences, plant sciences, and so on. And as I said, we're within early next week. I was hoping to have that to announce to you today, but we don't have the budget for that totally full, and obviously I don't want to sign off on commitments to searches that we are unable to fund. So we're very close though, and those will be the emphasis of what we do. Second goal I would say at the university level is clearly we need to be affordable and we need to be accessible to Wyoming citizens, and we need to provide excellent education. Those three kind of leave together. We are at a time nationally of very high student debt, and that leads naturally to questions of what's the university for? Yesterday, the Wall Street Journal, I will forward the article to all of you, had a report that they put out. They analyzed over 800 public universities in America, and their focus is on value. What do you get for what you pay? And they announced those results yesterday. They divide the data into a number of different ways. The one that is clearly important to us is land-grant universities. And I was very pleased to see that the Wall Street Journal ranks the University of Wyoming second among all land-grant universities in America in terms of the value that we provide for the cost paid. Number one is MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. If you look just at universities in general, the University of Wyoming, in terms of affordability and in terms of the product we provide, is ranked 5th across the United States. MIT is ahead of us, as is the Naval Academy. Clearly there's a low cost to the Naval Academy, but then you serve 5 years in the military. Virginia Military Academy, a similar situation there, and Brigham Young University are the 4 that are ranked higher in terms of the outcome in terms of what they pay. What that rankings, I think, reflects is clearly very strong support from the state of Wyoming. We are very thankful in the support that you give us, and also I think it reflects the emphasis of our trustees, that we hold down costs, we operate efficiently, and provide an excellent educational program. I know David has been very involved in the software implementation here that allows us to track our spending in ways that we were never able to do so before. So we've taken a lot of steps here to be more efficient, to hold down our costs, and I think that's reflected. But even in the end, if you look at student debt across the U.S., we're getting close to I think it's about $1.5 trillion. This is a massive problem in the United States. And yet at the University of Wyoming, the majority of our students graduate with no debt. That is a great statement for the support that you have given us, and the difference that makes for kids who come to this school is just phenomenal. And then not only do they graduate with no debt, we hire people into jobs that are relatively high paying compared to other universities. We track the pay of our graduates across the country. So no debt, majority with no debt, and then doing well in the labor market. And our goal is to ensure that... Mr. President, real quick, what do you attribute that to primarily? I mean, aside from the affordability of the education, is that just what they come in with their scholarships? Et cetera, but could you expound on that a little bit? In terms of the outcome, or in terms of the no debt? In terms of the low rate of debt and the fact that the majority of them don't have any. Hathaway Scholarship. I mean, the financial support that is provided by the state of Wyoming to our students is unparalleled elsewhere in the country. We are making some changes to our financial aid where we have had some shortfalls. I would say is Hathaway is a merit-based program. You receive it based upon your test scores and your grade point average. We have added what's called need-based aid, because there are a large group of students in this state that we need to go to college that look at a cost of $17,000, $18,000 a year, and that's really very difficult for them to pay their families. So we've taken $1 million this year out of what we were providing to non-resident students and putting that into need-based scholarships for Wyoming resident students. So it's a combination of Hathaway certainly, but it's a real emphasis of the university to keep the university being affordable. In terms of why the high-paying jobs, we've done a lot of analysis this summer. I've been president 10 weeks, so this is a fairly short term. Looking at why some students do better and some students don't do as well academically. And I am very pleased to report that a primary determinant is those that do well went to Wyoming high schools. our K-12 system is really producing, compared to our neighboring states, are producing graduates who succeed, and are increasingly, the gap between the academic performance of Wyoming residents and the academic performance of non-residents is growing over time. So I think K-12 system is doing a great job, and we have good faculty here. I think it's a combination of the two of those. So our goal is to provide a very cost-effective education and an option for a high-quality college education. That's what we're trying to do moving forward, and that, I would argue, is the key to a bright economic future for the state of Wyoming. So thank you for all you do for us. I think that's the emphasis of my remarks. We were only able to do this with your assistance. So thank you, and I look forward to any questions you might have.
Well, thank you very much for that information. Committee, are there any questions? Any questions? I would have one. You mentioned toward the beginning about that you're looking at hiring around 50 new faculty.
Correct.
Is that above average, below average, about par for what you normally hire in a new year?
Yeah, just to be clear, that replaces faculty members who have left. So we have 50 openings, and that's why it is 50. It is a little smaller. Previously, there was a early retirement initiative that we provided a couple years ago, and those people that were relatively close to retirement, we had a number of people leave earlier than they would have left, so we've kind of made the pool a little smaller going forward. So it's a little short, but it's not far off. We'd be more generally in the range of 60 to 70, but we are replacing each of the faculty members that are leaving. Sure. And I will now turn this over to David Jewell. Question? Sorry.
Questions, Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President, thank you for visiting with us today. We appreciate your time. You mentioned in your earlier comments that you had a high priority to staff the Department of Agriculture with good quality faculty. We appreciate that. We're hearing from our constituency that we want an emphasis on the agricultural department, and we want to build that with good quality professors. So thank you very much for focusing on that staff.
And there clearly is an issue with understaffing. As I look across the colleges, ag was hit very hard with the number of people leaving. We did not replace them in the same rate that they were going, so there's clearly an understaffing problem. So this will not just be a one-year emphasis. We're going to need to do this over a period of time, but we have to wait until there are lines that we could reallocate across schools to do that.
Further questions? All right, thank you
I'll
very
turn
much.
it over to David Jewell, who is our budget director.
All righty.
Thank
Jewell,
you.
take it away.
I don't know if this technology is working. I got connected here, but you all should have a packet that I passed out. It's called Budget 101. That hard copies would have been sent out. So if we can get it running, it can kind of come up on the screen. But we'll walk through that, and I'll mention page by page as we go. As I understood the request so my name is David Jewell. I'm the Associate Vice President for Financial Affairs at the university. As I understood the request was, as we look at the draft legislation that this committee is looking at and talking about financial reporting, especially around the College of Ag, not only the University of Wyoming, but specifically the College of Agriculture and the College of Engineering and Military Science, those things that are core to our land grant mission. It was brought to my attention to maybe start by taking a step back in that over the past 3 years, really, the University of Wyoming has not just made a technical change in its financial system and its way that it conducts business with the implementation of its new cloud-based systems for the general ledger, for human capital management, for supply chain management, grants management, and budgeting and planning. It was really reflective of a transformational change in terms of how the university approaches the way that we think about financial management, the way that we code our data, the way that we report our data, the way that and why that is important is because as we were, whether tough times or good times, that we make sure that we have the best data and information to make sure that we can use it to inform good and strategic decision making going forward. That ultimately is the end of the day. It wasn't just to put in a new new cloud-based software system. It was to say, how do we then allocate resources, how do we fulfill our mission, and how do we assess how we're doing upon that mission in terms of putting the dollars and the resources behind it and informing decision-making. So it was brought to my attention that I would then maybe report to the committee, start by saying, here's how an overview of our system and how we budget and how we plan. And then beyond that, kind of go into a little bit of the color or background around the last biennium's budget reductions. If any of this is too far in the weeds, if it is not what you want, I don't think I need to tell you, but please stop me. You will not offend me or hurt my feelings in any way. I'm more than happy to go through it. If I go too fast, likewise, please, happy to slow down. But I will kind of go at a high clip because it is rather dense, a bit of the material. So if we go to the PowerPoint, the slide deck, and start with really overall, what we're trying to do here on slide 4 is some of these things are from just to set the context to how we interact with our individual budget unit managers that represent all colleges and their units throughout the decentralized campus at the university. We talk about things now, but we want to look at planning overall, not just budgeting, but how do we think about how we allocate resources and put them to our highest valued use that meets our mission, and how do we do that in not just a technical budgeting way, but more of a strategic planning type of way. So we do that for a short term, but we also do it then we're moving more to long-term planning. Slide 5 talks about, again, the differences between what we want to do in a long-term plan versus what we need to do in terms of accomplishing our day-to-day tasks in our short-term plan. Moving on then to really what we view on slide 7 as the purpose of our budget that we have here is that it's really going to allow departments to maintain their realistic targets within their strategic goals of the university, allow an ongoing comparison between actual results and the budget, which I'll show you some examples of that before. Prior to this financial system, the university internally with our trustees and with others never reported our budget versus our actuals in terms of assessing our performance. We do that now. We have that data that we are able to do that type of analysis daily if we want, but I'll give you an example of a management report that we do quarterly. It facilitates conversations, just like the one we're having today, in terms of equitable but also transparent conversations that we can have, is saying where are the dollars, where are the resources coming in, and how are they being utilized. It makes us make sure that we, with our trustees who have the fiduciary responsibility of our financial statements and the well-being of the institution, that they make sure that our operating model is sustainable. We have a clearer picture about that now, of the dollars coming in and where they're being allocated and where they're being spent. And they also then help us monitor what we're ultimately building towards more of is analyzing some historical trend analysis to say how is our performance in the past, how is that moving us forward into the future, and how do we assess that. And then it allows us to do new activities as the strategic priorities of our deans, particularly the ones that you're interested in today in the College of Agriculture change. A good and clear and solid budget model allows us to activate and implement and be flexible with those new strategic goals and priorities. Let me pull this up then. Sorry. Now we got connected.
Because of the hookup, you'll only be able to see it on the back screen.
Oh, So, I apologize to those sitting in that row, but then if we go to slide 10, we put this in here just as an example of why it's important to have accurate data and how we code our data and how we report back upon it. In November of 2016, there was an article in the Boomerang that was repeating a study that had looked at all institutions in the Mountain West Conference. And we looked at it, and it said the University of Wyoming's administrative spending and growth appears to be among the highest of its peer institutions and greater than all but one of the other institutions in our Mountain West Conference. Knowing that, I had just come onto the university actually in November of 2016 when this article came out, and I said, let's dig into this and look a little bit when we were on our old financial system. And we did that, and when you look at when we did a lot of digging that took a few weeks, it was really that there was an error in our financial system, that someone had coded something around the current financial system, and that it was institutional support really was part of the NZ STEM building that we were building, and so it was miscoded. So then when you have outside agencies or others, or legislators or policy groups look at this data that we submit and put out to the federal government to do these type of ratio and benchmark analyses, it looked like we were way a lot higher than not. And so I just put this as we talk to our campus, as we talk to our trustees and other stakeholders amongst the state, of how important it is to have accurate data and make sure it's coded correctly, and that it facilitates much longer term decision making and trend analysis. So the next slide here begins to get into our chart of accounts, and this is going to get really way into the weeds. I am not an accountant by any means, so bear with me, but I think it's important so that you understand that this is the building blocks. If the legislature, if a trustee, if a faculty member, if a dean, if President Theobald asks, hey, I'd like to know this type of financial information, it really starts with the basic building blocks of our chart of accounts. How do we organize our financial system? How do we organize our data? And then how do we then be able to report upon it? And so that's the importance of what we call our chart of accounts, which was new starting with fiscal year 18. It was a brand new chart of accounts and financial system that you'll see later why that is then a challenge to kind of go back and even try to do comparisons to 17 as a complete and massive overhaul. Really what we have is, that we didn't have before, is we have hierarchies in our chart of accounts. And I think this really, as I understand it, gets it to the piece of legislation you all are considering sponsoring, is that in our prior financial system, we did not have an ability to roll up data, to look at it as a comprehensive grouping. When I came to the university, I met with one of our deans, and I said, what if I wanted to know how much your college spent, just one total number, total expenditures over the past 5 years, one number per year? And she said, David, it would take my team anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks to put that together, because they're adding up individual spreadsheets that were not linked together, that weren't in a hierarchy, that had a random order of numbers, and that they would have to manually go in and add those up. So when we face budget cuts, when we face decisions about faculty hires, when we face where do we want to allocate new resources or make investments, by the time we could get any type of analysis done, it's old. The decisions move on. And so that was a fundamental reason of why we needed to do that. And so one of the key characteristics is our ability to roll up data easily and report upon it. We have segments. We have nine segments of our chart of accounts. I will quickly walk through all these. I know this is really enthralling, this discussion, but it is, I think, important to give you a foundation of what kind of information the university is doing and the changes that we've put in place. I would say that drastically today, this is a different university in terms of its transparency, its financial management, and its forward thinking around its resources. There are 9 segments, and I'll go through each of these segments, how we kind of separate our data. The first of the segments really is the entity segment. If you think about it, we have a lot of different entities at the University of Wyoming that really roll up to one big organization, but we maybe need to create individual financial statements and balance sheets for each of these individual entities. And so you see them there. University of Wyoming, its own entity. The Alumni Association, it's its own 501c3, but it exists because of the university, so it rolls up into our statements, but we need to be able to generate independent statements for it. Same thing with Cowboy Joe, Wyoming Public Media, and Bison Run is a P3 partnership that we have that's some of our resident facilities that are there closer to 30th Avenue and Willett, that area. And so it has to, in terms of, have its own balance sheet and statements. We also have other, at the time of implementation, and current other state agencies that roll up into us, but we need to keep them distinct because not all, they don't necessarily all have block grants. They operate different from the university, so we need to keep those dollars separate, and that's what you see with Entity 21, Medical Education, and 31, Enhanced Oil. So that gives us the flexibility right away to say, what big organization are you working for? What big organization are you either collecting revenue or spending, making expenditures? And that's our entity segment. Next, we go into our natural accounts. This is just, you use these in every organization, so you have to code things in terms of assets, liabilities, and deferred inflows, net position, and so on and so forth, and revenue and expenses. I put this information, it's hard to see on the screen, but on slide 17, because I think this plays into a bit of the reporting requests you may have in your legislation in terms of how do we group up some of our natural accounts and how do we summarize those so that we can have a more concise reporting mechanism. So we can roll things up to tuition and fees as a revenue, grants and contracts, and then expenses, we can group them up to services and fees, travel, supplies, utilities, but that we can also go a lot more granular, and we can, on supplies, for instance, we can say, is this a lab supply, an office supply, a medical supply, so on and so forth. So we have the ability to go really way down into the weeds and the ability to come up. We also have, we operate on fund-based accounting at the university, so we have different things in what we call our fund classes, and so we have unrestricted, operating, and restricted, really, as well as plant funds and agency funds. Where I would point to is on slide 20 here, I believe, that really this is how you would think about where we spend our time budgeting and planning. We budget and plan under our unrestricted operating resources, and we've defined those here. The university's main operations, or the general fund, it's funded with the majority from state appropriations and tuition and fees and auxiliary operations, room and board, so on and so forth. Then we have also designated operating fund classes, which again, from a financial statement perspective, those are still unrestricted dollars of the institution, but those have been internally designated. Indirect cost recovery, our trustees that we earn on grants and contracts, they have a very set allocation methodology, and so they go into a designated operating fund that maybe returns to the dean of the college or is split between the department or the individual faculty researcher. On the other side, we have restricted funds that have they're titled restricted expendable, but they have restrictions. These are our foundation funds. These are our grants and contracts with not only, for instance, the Wyoming Game and Fish, but also with the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health. So they are funds that are available, and they are expendable funds, but they have restricted purposes, and so they are not, hence, unrestricted. Then we go into individual fund sources. So we couple a fund class and fund source. This is where the majority of our dollars go to unrestricted operating, but they also then, we can have, as you can see there, the Berger, Amy and Eric fund, Amy and Eric Berger fund. That's a very specific fund that we have, and so we know we can track those dollars in terms of gift dollars that people may give or endowments. The organization segment, I think, is next. That tells us, well, where is the department spending the dollars? So not only have we said, all right, what's the big organization? How do we classify the funds? What is it, revenue? Is it expense? Then what's the organizational segment around it that says, okay, this refers to that unit or the department that's actually spending it. And you see a list of those units in individual departments. We have roll-ups available for these. We didn't have before. So one of the roll-ups would be the College of Ag and Natural Resources. And so that is a simple roll-up. But what it allows us to do is then drill down further into what those other individual organizations might be. And I put in here examples from the College of Ag. So you see not only the very top line there says College of Ag and Natural Resources Subdivision. That's why I'll show you a report from there later. That encompasses everything below it. But we can also drill down to animal science. We can drill down to rodeo. We can drill down to the R&E Center in Powell. We can drill down to the Cooperative Extension Service. And so we can report at those levels. And that's really the functional day-to-day managing unit of the university, is that organizational level. That's also, for the first time, we've begun to align those financial organizational units with our human resource organizational units, with our student information systems organizational units. And while that seems maybe intuitive, it wasn't the way before. So when we would pull data from our old financial system, sociology in there didn't necessarily mean the same thing as what it was when we said, well, now give me a report of all the employees in sociology in our old HR system, and it didn't quite mean the exact same thing of either one of those in our student system that said, oh, what are the enrollments in sociology? So now, as we begin to align those, and that we have alignment amongst those three areas, it allows us to start to do a much greater job of integrated financial analysis and operational performance. So looking at where are our revenues, where are our expenditures, who are delivering it. We're a people-centric University of Wyoming, and so what are the types of people we're employing, and then also where are our students, and that in terms of our customers and our mission there. So that gives you an example of where we can drill down and also roll up. The expense class, this is required by the National Association of College and University Business Officers. Any of our expenses that we put through, we have to classify. This shows up in our financial statement later on. The only reason why I will mention this here is to show you that it gives us another opportunity that we created for the College of Agriculture specifically to track another granular level way of tracking expenditures was underneath the research expense classification. We were able to add a sub-classification for the ag experiment station. Same thing with under public service, 305, we were able to add a further expense classification that represents extension. And so as the College of Agriculture puts in their expenditures, if they tag them with that, they can then report out of the system, this is what we spent in this area around experiment station. This is what we spent on extension. Now, as a university, we will only report up the total for research and the total for public service in our financial statements. That's what our external auditors require us to do. But internally, we have the ability to drill down even further. So there's another set of flexibility. This is what it kind of shows up in our financial statements. These are the ones that ended June 30th, 2018. You can see those expense classifications come out in those categories. The last two segments that I'll talk about are program segments and activity segments. These really then allow for greater flexibility and autonomy at the individual college or unit level, how they use these. So the program really looks at something that might be a program ideally that is trans-institutional, that goes across the institution. The best example I like to give is if we ever said at the institution, we want to know what we spend on commencement, right? The College of Ag, they have a little ceremony there. The business school has something. The president's office puts on something. We do a lot of things related to commencement. If we ever wanted to do that and say, hey, how much are we spending as an institution as a whole on commencement? What we would then is put out a call, and we have a program that's called 1008 commencement, and we would ask everyone as they put in their transactions, their expenses that they made or revenue, that they would tag those then with the commencement program segment, which would give us that ability to then run a report that says this is what we're spending overall as an institution. It might be on, caps and gowns, it could be on rental of AV equipment, it could be whatever it is, but we at least then could roll that up together and look at it holistically across the institution. So units use this a lot, as well as then, and the College of Ag uses it, as well as then the activity segment. This gets down really to a level of even further granularity that the folks at my level would never look at this segment. It's really for the benefit of the individual unit so that they don't have to have so many shadow systems. For instance, our fleet, they want to know how much they spend per individual vehicle. So on maintenance. So what this activity segment does, if I opened up that complete list, you'll see a list of values for vehicle 1 through vehicle 150. And so they have to have a little cheat sheet that says, oh, this car is vehicle 1, this car is vehicle 2. But beyond that, there's not a need for them to have a duplicative shadow system for them to keep that data. They can tag all those expenses related to vehicle 1 and put it into our financial system, and then they can report upon it, and that gives them that flexibility. Another example of where the College of Ag, we created specific activity values for them, is we have an activity segment for every county in the state. And so they can track those expenditures or revenues within that county as they string together the whole string of segments. So I will just take a quick break there, but I don't think if there are questions. Okay.
Question, committee? Okay. Wait.
Mr. Chairman, I might.
Yes, Senator.
But since we haven't seen this information ahead of time, I'm not sure what we might see as you continue here, but some questions I had, and maybe they're in here somewhere, is like the revenue you generate or the university generates from state lands. Mm-hmm. Where does that money, how does that money funnel into the university, and where does it show up? And what one of your funding categories does that show up?
Sure. So if I can, Mr. Chairman, Senator Moniz, it does show up, and let me just take you there now, I think for the ease of the discussion. Another document you have, I believe, was the university's operating budget for fiscal year 20 that was approved. This is a larger document that is available online, and I did not print out the whole thing, but I did print out the copies for you all to have in terms of the individual colleges that are there. And so if you look to that document, you can go to page, and yours, let me find it. Getting there. If you go to page 41 in this document, this information I would also say, just if anyone would like in the future, we publish all this now publicly, and so you can go to the university's financial affairs website, and they are there as well for you to look at. But if you go to page 41 in the document, what you will see is on row 15, Senator, there's a line there, row 15, really column F if we're looking at FY20, that is a figure of $500,000. And so that figure is what the university draws in this fiscal year 20, with the approval of the trustees to put it in the budget. They draw from the College of Ag's permanent land income fund that is held at the treasurer's office, that then we draw those funds down, and it comes through then on that line item there. So you can see the dollars are recognized in our budget there. So that's where that's how we get them into our budget model for the College of Ag to deploy and use. Where they are then specifically, what those dollars are is, if we look here on slide 43, you can see this is the latest that I could find from the state land trust you see the number, the amount of acres in the land that the university has allocated to it through the University Land Fund and the Ag College Land Income Fund. And then the other, you can see there in terms of the dollars that go into the permanent land funds. These are for fiscal year 18, as well as the permanent land income funds. So the income funds are the ones that we draw down, and that's that representative of that $500,000. This isn't the only earnings that go in there. These are the dollars that the state lands office places in the fund. The treasurer's office, in terms of their investment earnings, they deposit dollars in there as well. So and I put that in the lead in there, for fiscal year 19, the income for the Ag College received a revenue distribution of approximately $1.7 million. I will say that is an anomaly in terms of that year, that high of a dollar amount, and that was driven by almost $1.5 million being attributed to some oil and gas bonus rental income that received in that particular year. But those dollars then go into those funds, and then we draw them from the state through the Wolf system into our budget model.
So a follow-up, Mr. Chairman. So as that revenue funnels in, how's it distributed and how's it designated? For example, let's say there's a land, I assume landowners through their wills or whatever donate property to the University of Wyoming. And there's probably some restriction attached to that, well, whether it's for the Ag College or the University of Wyoming. So how's that money distributed throughout the colleges as it comes in, and how's it prioritized?
The funds that you see in the budget model, Mr. Chairman, Senator, are at a baseline amount of $500,000 for FY20 that were brought into the college, that then the college then uses to budget and allocate throughout their college individually. I can't speak to directly to how the former interim dean allocated those funds in the budget model there directly, but they come into the revenue line to support the overall expenditures of the college. And that's the baseline amount that we incorporate into our budget model that our trustees approve and then move forward. Any dollars that are above and beyond that are at the state, then those dollars do require trustee approval to spend them and allocate them to purposes. In the most recent past, within the past year, I believe, 2018, the trustees did approve use of $1.3 million from this fund at the state to help with the cost of the BSL-3 lab, the biosafety lab that's out at the state vet lab, and to get that back on track and to provide the funding to get the project near completion so that it can be certified and online. So that's how that process would work in terms of any additional use of those funds above that $500,000 would then require trustee approval and a plan put forward specifically of how they want to use it. So I don't believe our Dean of Ag, I've not given she's early in her tenure here, we've not had further discussions about future uses of these funds or her plans about them just yet.
So one more, Mr. Chairman, if I could. So all of these revenues and sources are outside of the block grant, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Moniz, that is correct. These are not incorporated into our block grant. They sit outside of that, but are available for use by the university. We bring them into our budget model that I'm showing you in that booklet so that we have a comprehensive view of all those revenue sources and resources available to the institution, but they do not come directly through our appropriation block grant that we would go through with the Joint Appropriations Committee or with the governor. They would not show up in that budget, those budget documents with the state.
So one more, Mr. Chairman. So how, as these donors take place throughout the years, how does the university, who's the decision maker on how you allocate those funds or what you do with that property?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that would be our Board of Trustees.
Okay. And where does that show up? Those revenues, I assume you just told us that, but from a 30,000 view, let's take the Ag College, for example. They have their portion of the block grant. And then they obviously have revenue from this land fund. So when they're developing their budget, do they have access to all of the revenue sources so they have an overall budget?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Moniz, yes, they do.
Okay.
So if I may, on that row of the book 41 that shows that $500,000, if the college had chosen to budget that they wanted to use $550,000 or $600,000, that is available to the college to do that. Then once our trustees approve it, that triggers the trustee approval for the use of those funds for the College of Ag. And that's how we track it to make sure that they're not lost or used in any other part of the university. Those dollars show up right there underneath the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And so we've tagged them there and they have access to them there.
One more question. So I'm assuming a lot of the donors of property or whatever to the University of Wyoming, some of that might be restricted to a particular use. In other words, you have a donor that says, I want it to go to research in one particular area. Is there a way to track that as well?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yes. And so those dollars would not, if I'm understanding the question correctly, would not come through the Office of State Lands. They most likely would come through the University of Wyoming Foundation, of which we would develop a gift agreement, a contract that specifically outlines that. And if the land can't be liquidated, and the intent of the gift is for us to hold that land, then those assets would go onto the books of the University of Wyoming. We would have an individual fund source, as I went through before, that is the David Jewell Land Gift Fund. You know, we would name it about that. It would have that gift agreement, that contract with it, and those dollars for that, any associated dollars from that gift would go into that individual particular fund, and that's where the college now can budget that fund individually to use those dollars, and it only shows up in our financial system for use by that college. And so we're further able to make sure that we have those limitations and internal controls in our systems so that donor intent is met for those specific restricted gifts.
So there is a line item through the foundation to where you can track those dollars, and we can see that somewhere?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Moniz, yes, and so I would point you to page 42, where that grouping in the first top of the page, row 67 through 95, if you see that kind of box over to the left-hand side that says restricted expendable operating, that is a roll-up of a lot of individual foundation funds. So the College of Ag in our budgeting system will go in and they will see every individual donor, gift, or foundation endowed account payable income account. It will pop up. They will go in and build a budget individually for each one of those. And so we could run the same report for that individual donor account. What we show you here is, and that's where you see $2.8 million of gift income and column F, that on row 74, that is a summation of all of those individual gifts together. We're not mixing them, we're just rolling them all up together to report at a high level for management and oversight. But we could drill down into that number and look at every individual gift fund individually, and that's where those dollars go, and that's where those expenditures are made, so that we can record and report back appropriately for donors.
Thank you.
Committee, further questions? Okay.
So one of the things I will go back and just quickly highlight is if as we kind of go through what are the other available things as you look at some of the reporting available, I would point to if you go to the University of Wyoming homepage here, what you can do is showing up. Well, I can see it on my screen, but you can't. But if we can get it pulled up here, I'll work on that. But if you would look at the university's main page, there's a site there that we have that is the Brown and Gold report that you can access other additional information. And so I put some screenshots on there in the PowerPoint. I'm now on page 39. And in that, it's an interactive business intelligence site that you can then go and drill down in certain data. You have access to data around enrollment figures, degrees awarded, and those type of information and data that are available publicly. Anyone from the public, it's right there on our main website that we have that you can have access to in terms of that same things that we see that you have, that it can give you the degrees awarded and enrollment figures. And so that's right on the main website. You can look at there. The other thing I wanted to show was if you go to the Financial Affairs website, we publish all of these financial reports publicly, and so they're available out there for use as well. The budget document that I printed out, just the first part for all the colleges, that's published publicly. You have access to that. You have access to our financial statements now. You have any other of the access that you would need to any of those other financial reports. We've consolidated those into one easy-to-use, one-stop kind of shop, and so those are available and open to the public in our attempt to be more open and transparent about our resources. And then the other piece that I will show you is the other document I handed out was related to our financial management, our management financial report that we offer, that we run quarterly. And the reason why I wanted to show you this was this starts to kind of lead us into the other topic in those discussions. And so that document looks at something like this. It's a half page. This is from last quarter, last fiscal year's Q1, so it's just illustrative at this point. We haven't finished the first quarter of this year. But I wanted to show where we create this report quarterly. It gives you, again, another further higher summary overview of the university, broken down by individual main operating unit. And so that we offer that type of data, and there are footnotes in the analysis. This is where we're getting into publishing our budget versus our actuals, that we're looking at this on a regular basis. We're making informed decisions. If a college or university is trending below budget, they have better information where maybe they can reallocate resources within that academic year so that they don't have large opportunity costs in terms of they maybe didn't make this investment, they didn't do this initiative. So this, as we get up to speed, I will candidly say this concept is not a software system change as much as it is a cultural change and a training initiative amongst us. And so I put it out there. Our trustees see this. We see it. Some of the footnote explanations that we ask our individual colleges and units to do This is the first time that we really asked them to do this in last fiscal year, Q1, are not as strong of explanations as I would expect or any of us would like to see. But candidly, this is a vast improvement from where we started. When I got here, we couldn't 2 to 3 weeks to get any type of information, and now that we can produce this really daily, this is a quarterly report, and look at budget versus quarterly actuals, and that we can start to do some type of variance analysis and footnoting of those and explanation these are the things I say are transformational in terms of the financial management of the University of Wyoming. So some of these footnotes, candidly, are probably not as well vetted as they need to be, and that's a training issue. So this, we know over the next couple years that we've just begun year 3 of this initiative with our new system and our new way of thinking, that we will need to continue to build this muscle, build this strength, learn about financial analysis and planning, and how do we predict where our revenue is coming from in terms of our enrollment figures, and where that mixture of a resident versus a non-resident, how we're looking at how we deliver our course load through our faculty, whether they are tenured track or tenured faculty, or are they adjuncts, what are their teaching loads, and how does that impact our overall in terms of financial performance and our expenditure trends. That's where we're headed. It's just a journey. And so, but I wanted to be open and honest and share with you. So if you go to page 16 of that management report, you see the College of Ag there. You can see those summary by those unrestricted and those designated operating fund classes is what this report will show you that we have. The other report that this shows that we do quarterly, you'll see in terms of how we're thinking about where we are with our liquidity and our cash investments, our cash on hand. Those are later in the reports on page 36. You'll see things around our tuition revenue and our receivables on page 37 on a quarterly basis. You'll look on page 38 and see our debt portfolio. Where are we standing overall with the amount of debt that we have? And so this is intended as a management document that we can give our executive team, our trustees, and so they give a one-stop report, a snapshot that we put together that has a lot of information in it. If you go on to page 39 and 40, you'll start to see enrollment information in terms of broken out by a trend analysis over a number of years there, and also the different types. This now leads me, committee members, Mr. Chairman, to really where I think that we can spend some time. The next discussion was around the proportional or disproportional, if you will, assumption around cuts to the College of Ag and the biennium. It is a challenge to try to put together the old way of financial management and the old structure of the institution. It's kind of what this is all a big wind up to get us here. I think to show you we're doing our best, and I think we've made great strides in to be good stewards of all resources at the University of Wyoming, and to be as transparent and strategic and thoughtful about those in terms of its return on mission to our core values of who we are and our service to the state. That was one intent of going through a lot of this. The next is to say, this is complex. We spend a lot of time. We are a highly decentralized organization that has we do a lot of different things. And now we have a system and a tool that allows us to really roll that up and efficiently and effectively report upon that. And so that helps us make better decisions. And we continue to work on that. But then the third piece was to show you this looks completely different in the way that we group our data, the way that we report upon it in terms of today, and starting with fiscal year 18. So I'm going to say post-budget cut, the last significant budget cut that the university took, and then pre, which was FY 17, 16, and beyond. And so it is a challenge to try to compare those data one versus the other to say, well, this is where the College of Ag used to be in its old system, and then now where are they today in the new system? So I do have a little bit of insight into that, and so one of the things I wanted to give you is on page 45 of this quarterly management report. This was one of the ways that I felt that I could best come at this, because the way that we budget positions is vastly different. So to say how many positions did they lose, there's a couple reasons that's a problem. When the budget cuts came, the College of Ag had a lot of vacant positions in our old system, but they had gone through the leadership of the college at the time had gone through those and taken all the dollars of those vacant positions and pooled them under one pot of funds. And so there was an insight, and so they had a lot of vacant positions with zero salary, but they had one large pool of funds, relatively large, pool of funds that were sitting there. And so when those budget cuts were implemented, it was done in the best they could as a proportional amount. But so I can't tell you in that first track of how many positions did they actually lose. And so I'll get to that now on the next slide in terms of I can do it comparatively in dollar amounts. But what this page 45 does in the quarterly management report, this gives you the actual University of Wyoming employees that were on our payroll at our census date of November 1st in 2015, November 1, 2015, November 1, 2016, 17, and 18. So these are not budgeted positions. They are people who were actually on our payroll and getting paid. I think that, so from that you can see the trend. I don't have row numbers on there, but if you look at the top, it's benefited employees, then it goes into the next group is faculty and academic professionals, and then you see in terms of the College of Ag and Natural Resources, they had 218 full-time benefited faculty and academic professionals on our payroll on November 1, 2015. And then on November 1, 2018, they had 191. It doesn't necessarily, again, I would caution to say, well, they just lost that many positions or those positions were cut. It could be that there was a person that was on the payroll on the 31st but turned over, in that year. But so it's not a complete picture in terms of the number of budgeted positions, but it gives you a sense, and I hope you see that over a trend period, we do November 1 because that means the academic year has gotten started, our enrollments are here, our faculty are here, they're running. It's a good solid in terms of good illustrative operating model of the institution and that date and that snapshot. But so you can go through and then comparatively look, let's say the College of Arts and Sciences had 391 of those benefited faculty full-time positions in fall of 2015, and they were down to 369 in fall of 18. And so this allows you to some data to do some comparative and some insight. It also then provides that data later on around non-faculty employees. We don't have it broken out here because we're trying to fit it on one slide, but if there's an interest, we can provide that information, but we roll all of academic affairs up together in terms of non-faculty would be our staff support positions. I think it's notable, one of the things that we did do to help with our overall budget cut, if you look down to the total of faculty part-time figures for fall of 2015 were 79 on our payroll at the time, and in fall of 2018 that number came down to 24. We had a number of faculty employees and staff who were a little bit greater than maybe 0.5 or 0.6, so they were part-time, but they had full benefits that the university was paying. And so it was one of the ways that we helped deal with that, the overall budget cut to the block grant. We limited those. There are reasons why some faculty need to have that, and so it's down to 24, but those are all reviewed and vetted now in our process. And so that's just kind of, that shows how that trend of the decisions the institution made to help deal with those budget cuts show up then through some of this data. So there's that I wanted to provide in terms of, if it's a challenge for us because to say, oh, they lost X, Y positions. That's just the old way, not the new, but it's hard to say what they had on the old or the new. I think this is a very strong proxy to give you a trend of where they have been in their allocation. On, though, the actual then comparative, which is what you all have asked in your agenda, this is the data that we have to support that overall, and not positions, but in dollar amounts. So on slide 42 of the PowerPoint, you'll see that combined between, I broke it out here as transparent as possible. We had provided this report to the Joint Appropriations Committee in January of 2018. But it was only summarized to the very last column, not the percentage, but the total reduction by college. In this slide, I've provided the breakout. So you see by academic unit. The university took a much larger budget cut than this, but I didn't provide you the division of administration, the division of that. So overall, the budget cut was nearly $42 million for the institution. 17.5 was realized in these academic colleges. The remainder of that was realized then through overhead administrative units, the Division of Administration, Information Technology, IT, Economic Development and Research, Government Affairs. So I didn't provide those. I provided this in terms of comparing colleges to colleges. But you see here that the first two columns of numbers are the operating budgets or the support budgets that were reduced by college. So the College of Ag had about almost 1.1 million reduction in support budget over that. These are the gray columns are biennialized. So 1 million over the biennium for support budgets, and another 3.1 million or so in faculty and staff reductions as a dollar amount. And that includes the employer-paid benefits in those figures as well. So the College of Ag, the total reduction over the biennium was 4.1 million, which comes out to be about 24% of the entire reductions taken by the colleges at the University of Wyoming. And you can see the other comparators there. So I know it's not exactly what you all asked for in terms of the number of budgeted positions and looking at that and where they lost it, but I think between the management report on page 45, which is actuals, and this, which is the budget cuts in terms of dollar amounts, not individual positions, I hope can provide some greater insight of what you're looking for.
Representative Cobb.
Mr. Chairman, does the 23.7, does that represent the percentage that the College of Agriculture took as a total cut, or 23.7% of their budget?
It represents something slightly different than, Mr. Chairman, than that. It represents 23.7% of the total reductions taken by the colleges. So 4.1 million is roughly 23.7% of the 17.5 million of those colleges, that cut that was allocated.
Other questions? Okay, carry on.
And then I had the state land income funds that were there, and so, Mr. Chairman, that is the extent of what I've provided, and happy to take any other questions or feedback if it wasn't exactly what you all were looking for. Happy to give it another college try.
Committee, are there any further questions? Yeah, Representative Senator Bonner.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I think that would be useful. Representative Clausen asked if we could have those, the reductions for each college in context of their budgets. So if the College of Ag took a, 18% reduction, it'd be nice to know how that compares to the College of Arts and Sciences or Engineering. That's really what measures the impact on the college, is their proportional reduction according to what they had been used to and where they're at now. So I think that'd be really helpful. Hopefully that's relatively easy for you to put together.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that is not easy for me to put together, as it is in our old system. These are the old budgets, and so my point of the 2 to 3 weeks to get a total by college is there. Where I think the other proxy that I could give you is if you look at the FY20 operating budget, just to give you a sense of the magnitude of the size, if you were to go to that page, and I apologize, I didn't spend as much time on this as I should have, but if you go to page 41, if you look at the unrestricted operating section, the first half sections, rows 7 through 35, if you see, let me just say on row 18, the College of Ag, I will talk about FY20 budget, brought in, it was budgeted to bring in $3.589, $3.6 million of revenue, but it has then on row 25, you see really, I'll go actually on down to row 34, you see a total expenditures of $26.48 million. So that leaves a shortfall of the figure that you see on row 35 at $22.89 million. What that represents, that $22.89 million, that quote-unquote shortfall, is the call on the general fund for the College of Ag. If that makes sense. And so the general fund, so in our general fund of the university, we put the block grant in there, we put tuition in that fund, we put other unrestricted investment earnings in those fund, we put earnings from the university's land income fund into the general fund, and so we collect all that together and have a large revenue figure that then goes and supports the dollars here on these unrestricted operating budgets for each individual unit that falls short. There's really not any unit that makes it. So if you were then to look at, if you were to go forward just a few pages to page 47, no, don't look on page, sorry, 45, I apologize, page 45. And if you were then to look at row 31, or sorry, 35, row 35 on page 45. Row 35, page 45, that's the College of Arts and Sciences. Their shortfall on their statement of net activities, net results for FY20 budget is $41.2 million. And so the College of Arts and Sciences has that call on the block grant. And it's not just the block grant, it's the general fund of the institution. And so we can maybe try to summarize that better for you, Senator, in terms of giving you a sense in our new system, how the size of those calls on the general fund compare overall. But to do it in the old, it would be challenging and time-consuming, but not impossible, if that's the request.
And so just so I understand, it's going to take you weeks to understand how much you spent in the College of Agriculture in 2015? I mean, that's all we're looking for, how much you spend now, total, don't care about all the details, just total in the college versus 2015. It's going to take you weeks to look up that one number, how much you spent on College of Ag in 2015. It's going to take you weeks to do that.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, for the fiscal year 2015, yes, it will take that long.
Okay.
Committee, are there any further questions? Okay. Gotcha. Committee, further questions? Going once, going twice? All right. Well, thank you for that to that extent, Mr. Jewell. So if you have anything further, or not, but thank you. Appreciate the information.
Believe.
All right.
Some other folks from the College of Ag are next, yes.
Just 1 second. Okay, next up we have with the land grant university requirements, staffing reduction, comparison, and discussion. So Kelly and John and Roy, doctors, all, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, while we're getting set, if I could just have a moment. All right, thank you. So this is a lot of information, and our packets this time have been fairly light as far as coming into this meeting, and we're getting piles of information as we sit at our desks. And for me, I have to say, it's very hard to ask the appropriate questions or to digest the information that we're receiving on behalf of our constituency and make good decisions on their behalf when we're receiving this so late. And so I was wondering, and this is a question to staff and direction to agencies, how we change that so that we get these in a timely manner so that we can have them a couple weeks ahead of time to consider what we're looking at, to digest it, to formulate our questions. And we're hearing some of that, well, this is on our website, well, we're a citizen legislature, we're all running businesses and are employed elsewhere. So if it is contained on the website, we still need you to provide that to us and to our staff. And so I don't know if our staff has some ideas on how we might help this situation along, or if others do, but it's just something I feel a real need to address right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I guess I would say ditto to that. I mean, I wasn't going to say anything, but I mean, it's very frustrating to be handed 160-some pages of information, of dense information, 10 minutes before it's presented. But anyway, and as far as the online information, I've been looking that up as you've been going through your presentation, and under the brown and gold, and was that previously called University of Wyoming dashboard? Because that's what I found there was a link through Google that said dashboard is now brown and gold.
Mr. Chairman, without seeing what you clicked on, then yes, that would, I think it's on the main webpage.
Powered by Oracle?
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, yes, that's
Okay.
exactly what that is. And
Okay,
so
great.
that's
No, I just would,
that.
I assumed that's what it was, but I just want a clarification,
Sure.
so thank you.
Yes.
Okay, any further questions for David? All right, thank you so much. Okay, Dr. Witten and Dr. Crane and Dr. Means, was he coming up too? Or he must have slipped out. Oh, no, there he is. All right, gentlemen, please proceed.
Well, good morning, Chairman and committee members. It's a privilege to be here and to visit with you a little bit about our perceptions, or my perceptions really, of the land-grant mission and how that fits into the University of Wyoming today and serving our citizens. I'll first introduce my esteemed colleagues here. I don't know if will the presentation show up here?
You guys have a laptop to present that?
Oh, I thought it was an automatic deal. Maybe we'll stir one up real quick, can we? Yeah.
Well, maybe
Excuse me
we'll
for that.
if we got more than a day ahead of time, I think. That would have been useful.
Yeah, I thought it was automatic. Apologize for that. Well, if you've all got the handouts, I think we can proceed without that. It would have prompted me a little bit. Anyway, my colleagues that are presenting with me today are Dr. John Renton, who was sitting on the outside here. He's the Associate Dean for Research, we call it, but he's the Interim Associate Dean and Director of the Wyoming Ag Experiment Station. This is Rory Means. He's the Associate Dean, Interim Associate Dean for Academic Programs. So really he represents teaching, John Renton represents research, and I am the Director of Extension and Associate Dean for that also, so I'm kind of the research, or the extension side. So we really have our three primary focuses of the college here at the table. At the helm, who you'll hear from later, Dean Rasco, who we're tickled to have on board. You'll hear from her later. Anyway, but I'll get started. The assignment was to talk about the land-grant mission and a little bit about what it means at the University of Wyoming. A couple disclaimers. First, this isn't my area of scholarship, so if I take some liberties on my interpretation of the Land-Grant Act and what it means here, please excuse that. But I just wanted to kind of provide an overview of what it was. And I think the first slide, if you look at that, it shows our earliest experiment station, or our earliest R&E center at the territorial prison. And I think that's what people think of when they think of a land-grant university. They think of extension work, they think of research, but I think what you'll find as we go further in this talk, what really embodies land-grant and land-grant universities is our teaching mission. And that's certainly important. We all think research and extension is really important, but teaching is critical to that mission. So, and it really was emphasized in the Morrill Act of 1862. So I'm going to let John work his magic here maybe. Maybe. I'll just proceed and see how they do. So the second slide is a map that shows all the land-grant universities in the nation. You can see we're not alone. I think important to point out is there's really three classifications of land-grant. There's an 1862 land-grant, an 1890 land grant, and a 1994 land grant. And if you look at that map of the United States, you'll see how those are distributed across the states. The 1862s were the first ones. There's one of those per state. The 1890s were historically black-serving colleges that were brought in under the Morrill Act in 1890, and then in 1994 the act was expanded to include tribal colleges and to give them land grant status. So we'll take a quick look at the Morrill Act and what it says, maybe. You're going to have to trust my reading of the Morrill Act, sorry. Anyway, the Morrill, so we'll start out with what is a land grant institution. So the formal definition of this is, I see bewildered looks. Do you all have this in front of you? Okay, thank you. So a land grant institution is an institution of higher learning which is designated by its state legislature or Congress to receive the benefits of the Morrill Act of 1862. What the Morrill Act says, and I took this out of the Act, is states were granted lands, federal lands. The sale of those federal lands, there was about 30,000 acres granted to each state. The sale of those lands were used to establish a public institution in each state. Here's the quotes. Where the leading object shall be, without excluding other scientific and classical studies, and including military tactics, to teach such branches of learning as are related to agriculture and the mechanic arts, in such a manner as the legislatures of the state may respectively prescribe. That should resonate with all of you. In order to promote the liberal and practical education of the industrial classes in the several pursuits and professions in life. So that's what the Morrill Act said in 1862. Of course, we all love the part where it says agriculture and mechanic arts, right? That resonates strongly with us. It's our passion, it's our love in agriculture. But what I think is really important, nice job, gentlemen. What I think is really important to acknowledge is Justin Morrill's aspirations were really about access to college. So the things that President Theobald talked about in his speech really embodied what I think, again, taking liberties with my interpretation, what Justin Morrill was after. He was really challenging the classical model of higher education, which was European-based and largely limited to the wealthy elite. What Justin Morrill wanted was access to higher education by the industrial classes. In his speeches, he referred to these as the sons of toil, that people should have access to higher education, including the sons of toil. So being a son of toil and sitting next to two other sons of toil and being a president who's a son of toil, we are all passionate about this land-grant university and about the Morrill Act, of what it did. It gave access to education that otherwise my family certainly wouldn't have had, and many of our families wouldn't have had. So anyway, it's easy to be passionate about this mission. So that's what it does. I think it's also important to point out that not only access, but it really was a shared vision with the state legislatures. It's stated right in there that this is a shared vision. And as we talk about our budget and the block grant and how we spend money and accountability, we are committed to that, and it certainly remains a shared vision. So I think that's encouraging. Now, how do I advance them? Can you advance them for me? Okay, so there's a couple other acts that are really important that kind of embody the land-grant mission. The Morrill Act is the first one. I characterize that as kind of the teaching component. The next component that came about was the research component, and that was the Hatch Act of 1887. It's called the Agricultural Experiment Station Act. It provided direct payments of federal funds to each state for the establishment of an agricultural experiment station at their land-grant institution. So, a couple definitions here. What Dr. Ritten manages is the Wyoming Ag Experiment Station. What we all conceive in our mind is a station that might be out in Lingle, or there used to be one in Star Valley, but the Ag Experiment Station as an entity is really in charge of the research enterprise in the whole college. So there's faculty working on campus. There's also faculties at R&E centers, research and extension centers spent out through the state. But the station itself, its real goal is to foster foster research coming out of the ag colleges. So the Hatch Act specifically states what experiment stations should do. They should conduct original and other research investigations and experiments bearing directly on and contributing to the establishment and maintenance of a permanent and effective agriculture industry. Pretty specific what experiment stations should do. They should support the agricultural industry. We really haven't strayed from that. So the next part of the slide is what this looks like at the University of Wyoming. So this Hatch Act provides federal funding. It's an annual appropriation. It's variable. It can vary year to year. It doesn't much, and it's based on a really kind of complex federal formula. Originally based on the percentage of the population that were small family farms, but later it's much more complex than that. And John and I have both heard that the formula is going to be changed. We have no idea what that's going to do to Wyoming's allocation of Hatch dollars or Smith-Lever dollars. We just know it's going to change, and the secretary informed us that there's going to be winners and losers. Not surprised, but that's all the information we have.
Will that change be through rulemaking authority, or is that through an act of Congress?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know the answer to that. I think the change is rulemaking within the Department of Agriculture, but I'm not sure of that. Thank you for the question. Okay, so we get an annual appropriation of Hatch dollars. They require a 100% match. This is true with all federal capacity funds. We have to have a 100% match of non-federal funds. We use state block grants for that 100% match. We can only spend money that's consistent with a 5-year plan of work. So both extension and the experiment station, we submit and get approved a 5-year plan of work to the USDA, and we can only spend within that 5-year plan of work. John can carry money over for 2 years, so his annual allocation, he can keep a 2-year carryover in there. And as you might expect, these are federal dollars, so they're also associated with a lot of federal reporting and budgeting. The budgeting part is pretty new. In the past, we haven't had to budget our capacity dollars, but that starts pretty quick. So you might also expect there's limitations on use. We can only use Hatch dollars on approved Hatch projects, research projects. We can't spend those dollars on tuition for students, so we can't pay tuition for graduate students. We can't build facilities with these federal dollars, and we can't purchase anything that is entertainment, unless you think doing research trials is entertainment, which many of us do, so we consider that entertainment. But real entertainment, as conventionally described, we can't spend these monies on. So that's the Hatch Act. That's what established the Ag Experiment Station. So the next one, near and dear to my heart, is the Smith-Lever Act of 1914. This is the Cooperative Extension Act. Again, it provides direct payments of federal funds to each state for the establishment of cooperative extension associated with their land-grant university. The Act states that cooperative agricultural extension work shall consist of development of practical applications of research knowledge and giving of instruction and practical demonstrations of existing or improved practices or technologies in agriculture, home economics, and rural energy. Probably still pretty contemporary focus for us if we think about broadband and all these other things that we hope to advance in Wyoming. Pretty contemporary focus and meets a lot of needs still, but that's what it originally said in 1914. Okay, in Wyoming, thank you, Wari, it's the same thing. We get an annual appropriation, it's variable, and it's based on a federal formula. We have to have 100% state match. We call it state match. 5-year plan of work. We have a 5-year carryover in Smith-Lever, which we're grateful for, and we have lots of annual reporting, and we budget these dollars to the federal government. Many of the same limitations as on Hatch dollars. Important distinction is Smith-Lever dollars, our federal funds that come to extension, we cannot use for teaching 4-credit classes. So I can't take Wari if he's 100% extension and ask him to teach a class on campus where there's college credits awarded. It's intended, these federal dollars are intended for non-formal education that does not result in college credits. Now, most of our appointments that are faculty members that might have a research or teaching split, we call it, they may teach classes, but they don't do it on federal dollars. I think an important consideration is these limitations on use also extend to the match. So the match dollars are included on these limitations with this. Okay? So that's the Smith-Lever Act. Here's what it means at the University of Wyoming. We also get some other capacity funding, and there's acronyms here. I'll try to remember them. But on the extension side, we get Smith-Lever dollars. We get some special needs monies out of USDA. We have RREA money, we call it. That's Renewable Resources Extension Act monies. And we have Expanded Food Nutrition Education Program money, FNEP programs. On the Wyoming Ag Experiment Station side, they get the hatch dollars we talked about. They also get some animal health dollars. They get multi-state hatch dollars. And they get McIntyre Stennis dollars, which are forestry-related research project. True?
Plus rangeland, forage for livestock.
Okay, forage for livestock. Okay, here's the numbers, and this is through 2018. This just gives you a feel for what federal capacity dollars come to extension and research. So, see if I can get a pointer here. So these top rows, these 5 rows are the research dollars, so that goes into the Ag Experiment Station, Animal Health, Hatch, Multi-State Hatch, and Max Dennis. You can see it's about a $2 million allocation, up to 2.3 variable annually. On the extension side, we used to get something called CSRS. That ended a few years ago. But FNEP, RREA, Smith-Lever, Section 1 and 2, our total is about 1.9, approaching $2 million annually. So that's what we get from federal capacity dollars. They haven't gone up much, and they are variable. We hope this new formula doesn't hurt as bad, but again, these require 100% match. And I think a really important consideration
Senator Ball? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. So how does that factor in your overall budget of the extension? Can you give us looks like almost $4 million out of how much in your overall budget for extension?
Okay, I'll probably get in trouble for not providing enough detail, but in general, I consider the federal side about 1/3 of the extension budget. That varies a little bit, so I consider 1/3 federal dollars, about 1/3 from state block, and about 1/3 from counties. So I would say about 1/3 are in that neighborhood of our budget.
And so of those 2/3 that are outside of federal, what functions fall under those funding sources? If you just give us a brief overview of what qualifies and that everything except for federal.
Mr. Chairman, let me make sure I get the question right. So outside the federal dollars, what are the state and county dollars used for?
Yes.
So we try to keep our federal dollars to support operational funding. State are largely probably approaching 80% of our state allocation is tied up in salaries. And the county funds we get pay half of the salary of 4-H educators in every county in the state. So the county allocation we get largely supports our 4-H program. That's exclusive of facilities. Counties provide us office facilities and support, but the salary dollars go into our 4-H program directly.
Carry on.
So I just put another bullet that came up here. I think it's important when we look at these roughly $4 million, $4.5 million that we get in capacity dollars. Each of these sources have really specific limitations on their use. So, and I'll go through them again. They require non-federal matching funds. We have to have pre-approval for expenses over $5,000. They're formula-based, annually variable, and must be spent according to a 5-year plan of work. I think it's important to note, for all to know, that 5-year plan of work reflects federal priorities, federal spending priorities for research, and federal spending priorities for our engagement or extension work. That doesn't mean that they're not relevant to the state of Wyoming, but it means that federal initiatives, we have to put our needs in the state of Wyoming in the context of federal initiatives. So I think that's an important consideration. Question, Mr. Chairman?
Representative Clausen? Go ahead.
So maybe I'm thinking of this too simple, but Smith-Lever, Hatch, would the Smith-Lever be designated for, say, 4-H programs and Hatch for other sorts of extension, or am I oversimplifying this?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Clausen, no, you're not. Hatch is largely research, Smith Lever is extension. So if you think about funding R&E centers, research faculty on campus, that would be Hatch dollars largely. If you think about funding extension educators out in the state and extension specialists working on campus, those would be largely Smith Lever dollars.
Senator Moniz.
You said, mentioned that was based on federal priorities. Could you elaborate on that process? It makes no sense to me if you're not focused on the state of Wyoming priorities as opposed to federal priorities.
I'll take a shot at it, Mr. Chairman and Senator Moniz, and I may hand off to one of my colleagues here. So federal dollars follow federal priorities. So they'll set priorities for research. They're largely broad enough that they fit many of our issues in Wyoming. And I don't know, Dr. Ritton, you can probably tell us the top federal priorities on research. He's busy looking them up right now. But I can tell you that serving underserved audiences, food safety and food security are big ones on the extension side. Small farmers, ranchers. So it looks like the top 4 are communities, family, and health. Number 2 would be community socioeconomic prosperity. Number 3, human health, wellness, and nutrition. And 4 is natural systems, food and fiber production. So those are the federal initiative priorities that we would follow in our plan of work. Our plan of work looks very Wyoming, though, but we fit those priorities into Wyoming's issues.
Thank you.
Okay?
Go ahead.
So this is just to kind of wrap up. I think what it's important to leave you with is we've got a long legacy in Wyoming. 150 years of a land-grant university, 125 years with the Ag Experiment Station, over 100 years of extension. And our commitment to this mission, and I think you heard it this morning, our university's commitment is strong to the land-grant mission, but I also think we recognize that we need to remain relevant and accountable, which requires almost constant change to make sure what we're providing addresses the contemporary issues of communities in Wyoming and the needs of our students and the workforce, certainly. We also recognize, and I think it's important to say, that the success of this university, as a land-grant university, will always be at least partially judged on how well we serve the people of the state. And we're committed to that. But to serve the people of the state effectively, I think our plea to you, or mine anyway, is it all comes down to people. We need people. We need outstanding classroom teachers. We need innovative, cutting-edge researchers that are on the edge of technology and that are pushing the boundaries of science. So we in Extension have something to extend. And we need outstanding Extension people located in every community in Wyoming and on the campus of the University of Wyoming. So I think it comes down to people. It comes down to having people across Wyoming and building relationships with our constituents. So with that, so I'll take questions.
Thank you, Kelly. Questions, committee? Yes, Senator, Representative Tass, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Just kind of a silly question, I guess. The land grant, originally, you said earlier that you were granted 30,000 acres per state. Just curious, how many of those acres does the University Ag Department still hold? Would you know by any chance?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Tass, I can easily answer that question that no, I would not know. So my understanding is that the original 30,000 acres was sold, and it was the revenue off of those. But again, this isn't my area of scholarship. Somebody else could probably tell me different. But I think those areas did not end up in our R&E centers that are spread through the state, are not those original land grants.
Okay, thank you. Just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess along those lines, because that's somewhat my impression, and maybe I'm wrong too, but just to the history of the whole program, it would seem to me that those 30,000 acres for each state, that they were not held on to for very long, or at least the bulk majority of them weren't, and that they would have been sold off, if not in their entirety, then in their majority pretty early on. Is that a fair assumption?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's right. But
Okay.
again, you may have as much knowledge into that as me, but that's my understanding, that the original grant was not in whole, and it was the revenue from the sale of those lands that provide for the establishment of these institutions.
It wasn't the college, it was the whole institution.
Yes, Senator Bonner.
Thank you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman. I'd like to focus a little bit more on your organizational structure and how do you provide direction, say, to the experiment stations? Let's focus on that to begin with. How much control, operational control, do the folks actually doing the work at those stations have? And how much direction do you provide them from here in Laramie? If you could go over that, how that works, that'd be helpful for me.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Similar, this is the one with the feedback. Okay, I'm going to plead a little bit of the fifth, similar to our president. I've been in this office since about middle of April, so it was after the last budgeting session went through. But we have station directors at each of our 4 research centers out in the state. They have pretty autonomous control over what they do. They all have assistant farm managers, and then there are faculty that are located at each of the centers that report to their department heads on campus. As far as what they do, we do have advisory boards at all of our R&E centers that provide some guidance and input as to what we should do, as long as it falls under these kind of requirements of the Hatch Act. We do have some statewide initiatives we try to address, but each of the centers is a little bit different. For example, Powell has a lot of variety trials for row crops specifically. Sheridan is more of a forage-based center. Out in Lingle, Sarek is more of our agricultural system, so we're trying to do things that involve both dry land cropping, irrigated cropping, rangeland, and animal production. So they all kind of have their own strategic plan that they help develop. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it is some central direction, but they all have their own autonomous budget that they weigh in on the budgeting process.
Okay, so it's just the reason I'm asking is I've heard, say the Lingle station, if they're have to replace a tractor tire, maybe that exceeds their budget. How long does it take them to do that? What's the process if you have an unexpected occurrence and it's time sensitive? How long does it take? What hoops do they have to jump through in order to actually continue to operate?
That is a fantastic question. In the new budgeting system, it is unclear to me how we reserve money for those sorts of expenses. We do generate crop sales and livestock sales. Some of that is pooled for the AES as a whole, which is in part specific for some of those emergency funds. Each station does hold on to some of their own, but that's in their budgeted system. So if it's something that's not expected, it can be tricky as far as how we pay for that. Because again, that $5,000 limit on funds, I can't send Hatch funds, even though it supports the research project, without approval from the USDA first. So for example, we just got a plot combine up at the Powell Center this year. It took, my understanding is 2 or 3 years before we got approval from USDA to buy that specialized equipment up there. So it is a long process. We are trying to provide some more flexibility in the budget. With this new system, we're all learning, and again, this budget happened before my time, so I'm not sure how we do that directly, but I have asked David Jewell's office to help show us how to do this in the future so we can plan better and have a reserve pool of money, kind of a prepaid deferred maintenance type of account. We're working towards that, but it's not done yet.
Yeah, that's definitely some issues I've heard from, I guess, southeast Wyoming is, if you can't replace the tractor tire in shorter than 2 weeks, and you're kind of wasting your time there. That research probably isn't going to do any good if you can't operate effectively. So there's just something that I've been kind of stewing on, and obviously it wouldn't be that hard. I understand the USDA is going to take a while, but it wouldn't be that hard to front the money, then have it backfilled from those federal funds or whatever the case may be. So just something that I've been thinking about committee as we address this topic. How do we make the extension service or the experiment stations more efficient, more effective, and make sure they can accomplish their mission when they're sometimes they seem weighted down by the bureaucracy due to whatever reasons from that's here in Laramie and a geographical isolate from what's actually happening in the field. So just a question and or comment. So.
I would add one more thing too, is the way I've done this since I've been in the office, this growing season, is we do have some discretionary money on state funds that I have shipped out to those stations when those needs arise. But again, there are some limitations on what we can spend them on. So if it's not budgeted and approved beforehand, depending on the equipment, it can be a challenge. But we do have some flex in our budget that I'm currently pushing out as needed.
Yeah, Senator Moniz.
Yeah, we could defer to David. How can we help these people do that in the budgeting process?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Moniz, I would come at it from a different perspective in that the budgeting process does have that flexibility in it to address it. The College of Agriculture right now is sitting on over $1 million of unrestricted operating reserves that they have at their disposal to use for just as such emergencies. This is not a necessarily management issue around the financial system. Maybe it is around decision-making or a process of knowledge, getting that there's a tractor tire or something or a combine or a piece of equipment that's out there. But there is an established process that the president has the authority to allocate and move dollars up to $100,000 or 10% of a unit's budget, which would meet the $100,000 immediately without Board of Trustees approval. If it goes above that, then there's a process that I call the chairman of the Budget Committee. We can get a call done pretty quickly. We get on the phone, we get it happened, and we get the motion for the full board to get it addressed and fixed. The Board of Trustees have made that commitment. The administration has made that commitment. If there are still challenges with operations, then we can address those, but I would contend that they are not a resource issue in the College of Ag. They're not a resource issue at the university in terms of dealing with those types of emergencies, and they are maybe a process communication issue that needs to be addressed.
That definitely sounds like the issue. There's a communication gap here that maybe they're just trying to learn the new system. But you can see from our constituency the frustration that they have when in the process. So thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Committee, further questions to this point? Okay. Carry on. Is that all?
We're done if you're done with us.
A couple of somewhat more off-the-wall questions. In general, since the 1994 expansion to the tribal colleges, has the Wind River folks ever expressed any interest in working with the university to set up a tribal college in Wyoming?
I was not, Mr. Chairman, I wasn't involved directly in those conversations, but my understanding is initially they did pursue that. I'm not sure what precluded it from happening, but I just know it was never done.
Representative Clark.
Mr. Chairman, so say those Hatch Acts and all those federal grants, do they have to go to the land-grant university, or could they be scattered out through other places?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Clausen, my understanding is they are allocated to the land-grant university, the established land-grant university in that state. There's been some challenges on that, but right now that's the policy.
Anything else? I guess briefly one more that I had, and that goes back to a slide that you had on here with those numbers and facts and figures. Up in the research, in research under animal health, that funding seems to be, it fluctuates wildly back and forth. And is that a phenomenon on a national scale, or is that unique to Wyoming, or could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Again, this predates my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been pretty constant. We just got our newest allocation. That's about $24,000. So I think that's just been deteriorating at the federal level over time. I don't think it's tied necessarily to Wyoming. So again, it's going to be one of those formulas I think is going to continue to change, but it's similar to the CSRS money, I think, is that it's been de-emphasized at the federal level is my understanding.
I'd like to pop in here if you don't mind. I'm the business manager for the college, and they're fluctuating pretty radically in certain years because the formula was done incorrectly at USDA. We had to pay some money back, but about 30,000 is what we get. So we did end up paying that money back because it was an error in the formula. And John wouldn't have known that because it was before his time. So
to clarify, so the reasons for those vast fluctuations are that that money was returned, not necessarily, this isn't necessarily showing what was initially allocated or given?
It is what was initially allocated, but we did in further years have to return some of that money.
I see.
Because our allocation is typically around $30,000 for animal health, and we had one year that was radically larger. So we paid it back.
Is that a phenomenon that has happened in other areas of budgeting before, or, I mean, is that a common occurrence?
No, that was very uncommon, and it was just that particular instance that I'm aware of.
Mr. Chairman, I would add that I actually just got a notice from USDA that similar things happened to the Smith Lever funds at other institutions this year, so it's not uncommon at the federal level that they send out too much money occasionally. So there are other institutions this year that have to return Smith Lever money from extension. So it's just something in the business office there that calculated the formula incorrectly, and then we get to pay that money back. Luckily, it didn't hit our institution this year, but it's more common than I would have thought at the federal level.
Thank you for expanding on that a little. All right, further questions before we let these folks go? Yes, Representative Clausen.
Mr. Chairman, so I assume the USDA has penalties if these funds aren't used necessarily for what they're supposed to be used for, say Smith Lever, or if they go to somewhere else, diverted accounting requirement, something like that?
Yes, if we get audited and they've gone to restricted uses, we get to pay that back out of state funds. They will audit it and make us pay them back out of non-federal funds. So I don't know if there's actual penalty or a fine, but we do get to repay the money that we misappropriated.
Okay, further questions? All right, well, thank you guys for the presentation. We appreciate it. So we will move on. Lost my... Perhaps we want to take about a 10-minute break, and let's go ahead and do that. It's 9:49. Let's try and be back here by 10 o'clock so we can keep rolling, but let's take a 10-minute break. All right, let's call this meeting back to order and keep moving on. We've got quite a few things left to do, and we want to try and be done by noon so we can get to lunch and the tours that our hosts have set up for us. So, legislators out in the hall, please move this way. There they are. I think we do have a quorum, so Dean Roscoe and again, Dr. Means, thank you for being with us. And the floor is now yours, so take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for inviting us here today to talk about some of our plans for the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. So I'll talk a little bit today about our vision and mission. We've been doing a lot of work with our department chairs and our faculty and our leadership team over the last, 10 weeks since I've been here on trying to ensure that we have a vision and a mission that's consistent with our land grant objectives throughout the college. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the changes in the college and then move into our new initiatives. So our major focus this year is on reimagining and rebuilding a new foundation for our college, focusing on our students, issues with Wyoming agriculture, our rural communities, and then statewide engagement, specifically on the extension side, along with some forward-looking strategies that we'd like to present to you today. So our vision is to aspire to be the best. Our focus is on serving students, and like President Theobald was mentioning, on access, affordability. We're working on our scholarship program to try to build that out, provide excellent opportunities for internships and other types of experiential learning opportunities for our students. So we're graduating professionals that are ready to work in agricultural fields, whether it's in Wyoming, which is where we're hoping they're going to stay, or in some other community. We're also focusing a great deal on interdisciplinary and cross-cutting programs between research, teaching, and extension that would improve the quality of life for people across the state of Wyoming, and also to enhance our agricultural communities and environment and ecosystem. So we do want to be nationally preeminent. There's a number of terms have been kicked around about being a Tier 1 agricultural college. It's hard to find a ranking for something like that, but I don't think national preeminence is going to be that hard to define in the context of what we can do best here in Wyoming and what we could do with this institution to serve as a model for the Intermountain West. So again, our focus is going to be on educating the next generation of professionals, rebuilding our research programs, so we do have some infrastructure and people needs in that area, and then rebuilding extension so we connect better with our communities and partner with our industries across the state. So we're not going to be able to be all things to all people. This was something that Mark Staten, I know, raised with this committee in the spring. But we are working very hard on making strategic choices about where we're going to allocate our resources and focusing on what we can do best, taking advantage of the uniqueness of our state and the resources that we have here to work with. So even though we may have limited resources, excellence is not something that's limited. We can be excellent in what we do. So our mission then is on re-imaging and rebuilding our foundation based on some of the issues that we discussed earlier this morning with a loss of capacity across various programs in the College of Agricultural and Natural Resources. And everything stems from having great people, so we're looking to be able to rebuild our faculty and staff so that we can provide better service to the citizens of the state. Wyoming is not going to be, the university is not going to be successful if the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources is not preeminent. Agriculture is the foundation of and is inextricably integrated and linked with other major industries in our state, which are tourism and energy. And so having a strong College of Agriculture is going to be integral to the future success of the state of Wyoming. We are committed to the land grant mission. This is something Dr. Crane talked about earlier this morning. And we are focusing our attention as we are building out our hiring plan and our programmatic objectives to strategically integrate our programs across research, teaching, and our outreach missions in the college. So hopefully you'll be able to see some of that as we move forward in this presentation today. We do have a lot of changes at the college. I'm a new dean as of July 1. We also have appointed Kelly Crane as Associate Dean and Director. John Ritten's our interim. We're hoping he'll be permanent. Rory Means, same, as our Associate Dean for Academic Programs. We have a couple other individuals here I'd like to introduce. Andrew Niss, our Head of Plant Sciences in the back. He'll be talking to you lunch, and Dr. Panther is here with him as well from Plant Science. LeVar Bish is our interim Chair of Animal Science. He just started, about a month ago? About a month ago. Chrissy Wade is here. She's our interim chair. Hope that she'll be permanent as well. Really like working with Chrissy. Jonathan Fox is our new interim head of veterinary sciences. We think this is a good move. The veterinary science chair position was so big that we broke the position into 2 roles. So Jonathan's taking over the management of the BSL-3 program in our academic programs, and Will Legreed is going to continue to be director of our Wyoming Diagnostic Laboratory. And then we're going to move Steve Paisley and Scott Lake into permanent positions as directors for 2 of our R&E centers, Steve Paisley at Sarek and then Scott Lake here in Laramie. So this is a lot of change in a very short period of time within the leadership of our college. But I think this is going to mean that we've got a lot of new folks, a lot of great ideas, and we're going to be moving things forward. Just wanted to address a couple of things that came up in the legislative session. I know that Meredith is also going to raise some issues as well a little later this morning. So we have with Dr. Fox new leadership structure in veterinary science, and this is helping to move the BSL-3 initiative forward. We do have a hiring plan. This includes hiring the BSL-3 director with a search starting this fall, and then with office associate accountant position and a laboratory technician position, which will bring us up to the 90% funding target that was a recommendation from the legislature earlier this year. We are moving forward with the rodeo program. A site analysis was completed last month at the R&E Center. We have some projections on the construction costs for the horse boarding facilities. So that project's moving forward as well. Bo's going to be addressing some of these issues at lunch for anyone who's be coming. We're happy to take any additional questions now. Yes, sir. Senator Moniz.
I think it's important, Dean, that $500,000 gets spent sooner rather than later. Our appropriations might take a look at it and.
We're moving as quickly as we can on this project. And so I'm very happy that Bill Mai with facilities is very focused on getting this project constructed at the university level, and we have a good team of individuals working on getting this built out.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. As far as the Ag Research and Excellence Fund, we do have $500,000. We're looking for a match right now. I know Craig Russo is here. Craig here? Our Foundation Development Officer. We are going to be meeting with a potential donor for these funds in the next 2 weeks. So this endowed professorship would be focused in rangeland management, or ranch management in that general area, with an emphasis on forestry. So this is where we'd like to see this position go. So hopefully we'll have those funds, that match nailed down shortly. We do have some immediate priorities here. So our focus is going to be on an integrated approach to serving our students, Wyoming agriculture, rural community vitality and health, and then our statewide engagements. We're focusing quite a bit this next academic year on building out degree and certificate offerings, which would include distance learning and hybrid programs. One of our major focuses is going to be on livestock and forage production and the constraints and the needs that we have to address from a technology and a community standpoint to operate at high altitude environments. We have an invasive species initiative focusing on annual grasses. I'll mention that to you in a minute. And then again, focusing on our rangeland and our ranch management program. So this is going to be both an educational program, but also integrated with our research and extension components as well. We do have a hiring plan, so I understand this is the first time the college has had a hiring plan that's been extensive. So we have put that forward to the president. We've asked for a number of faculty positions, and we also have support staff positions built into this as well. And we're going to be working through this hiring program. We're hopeful that we're going to get, I'd say maybe more than our fair share out of the CPM request. As President Theobald was mentioning this morning, I believe he's very focused on rebuilding the College of Agriculture, and we appreciate his support. I was hoping that we would have had notification on what those positions of the college would be able to hire for, but as President Theobald said, we're probably looking more at Monday before we know what that is. As soon as we know that, we'll release that information and solicit your assistance in, with some of those hires. We also have an infrastructure plan. We're working on a major university facilities plan. A couple areas where we're going to start are going to be with our Ag C building and also with the Laramie R&E Center. And then some of our emerging initiatives that we're looking at. Yes, sir.
Senator Moniz.
Senator Moniz.
Thank you. Are you going to elaborate on that at some point?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Okay. So our major emphasis.
Senator Bonner.
I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
So,
Mr. President.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned forestry briefly, and I
Yes.
think that's a good focus. We've heard that one of the universities up in Missoula had been known for its forestry program, and the impression I got was that it's sort of not as prestigious as it once was, and it seems like there may be an opportunity to take advantage of that in the Mountain West if nobody's going to be filling that gap. So I appreciate the focus on rangeland management, on ranch management. What are your thoughts on perhaps forestry being an emerging priority for the College of Agriculture, something that we could really distinguish ourselves in the region?
I see, and I'll ask some of my colleagues to weigh in here, maybe Andrew, is he still here? And then also maybe John as well. It's a little bit outside of my particular area of expertise, but from working in the rural West for the past 30 years, I see that there's a major, with agriculture production, there's this interface between range and forest, and we're doing a lot of activity with forest management is an important part of what's involved with rangeland. Oh, Scott's here. Yeah. Oh, good. Scott Miller, he's from ESM. So what I'll do is I'll have Scott address this issue, since he's an expert in that area.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm Scott Miller. I'm the department head in Ecosystem Science and Management, and we hold the Rangeland Ecology and Watershed Management degree program in our department. Getting directly addressing the question about role of forestry, we have a vision and have articulated an idea that we should be expanding our undergraduate teaching and research into forested lands in Wyoming. We have seen across the entire campus losses in people who work on forest ecology and forest resource management, and that's true across the West. I think you mentioned one of our fellow institutions to the north, also true to the south. There's a lot of opportunity to do work in these areas. What we are not focused on, to be blunt, is forest production from a typical forestry program, which would involve more focus on the economics of forest extraction. With forest products, yes, talk about that, very important in the state of Wyoming, but forest resource management, as we define it, really focuses on healthy rangelands. We use forests as a range resource for grazing. Healthy forest resource management involves timber industry, resource extraction, tourism, and range management. So that really puts it into the purview of the link between science and management for healthy watersheds and forest as a major part of that. I do think that we have a big opportunity for undergraduate growth as well as doing important research that would benefit the state.
Okay, follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bone, go ahead.
Okay, so what would it take to sort of have a premier tier one, if that's the word that we're throwing around, forestry program? How much effort would that take from I guess working together as the legislature and the College of Agriculture, University of Wyoming?
Human resources primarily. I'm not sure that we'd be able to call ourselves a tier one forestry program because then we're maybe competing with Minnesota or Washington or Oregon State, really big
I guess they have more trees.
forestry programs. But to raise ourselves up to, where we are leaders in forest resource management, we're talking about a couple of positions that relate to forest ecology and forest resource management and extraction for product. So it's not a simple lift, to be honest. And so we have a longer range plan to try to make that work. We'd need people who can handle forest ecology and the business end of resource management.
Senator Moniz?
Thank you. This is more of a question for Dean Rasco in establishing your priorities for your program in the college. But I asked this question at one of your advisory council meetings, and I'm still curious, as you talk about programs that you're developing and your priorities, do you have anywhere in your plan some sort of a placement program to where as you graduate students, obviously you're focusing on priorities for your program so you can place these students and put them to work in the state of Wyoming or somewhere in the workforce. Do you have any kind of a plan on as far as placement goes? In other words, when they graduate, you don't just say, glad to see you, now go out and find a job. There's some sort of an anticipated program where you can place these students in the workforce.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Moniz, at this time we have no formalized plan. It's certainly something we've thought about and certainly we spoke about at our last meeting. We do have a internship coordinator, and we are looking at how we can enhance some sort of a placement plan. The university has some resources in that area. Again, people is what makes things happen in that regard. I mention internships because internships often lead to employment. We're hesitant, at least I'm hesitant, to require internships of every student. Not every student maybe would benefit, but I think we can, we're working towards developing a much more robust internship program, and that in and of itself will lead to a lot better placement of our graduates.
I'm just thinking that, you might have a job fair. I mean, at the end of every graduating season, there's got to be the BLM, Forest Service, if you're talking about a forest program, bring those people in and have them interview your students, or some way to funnel some of your students into the workforce rather than have them go out and try to knock on doors and find work.
Right. So the university does have a job fair, and I've attended for the last several years. One thing that we need to work on is getting more ag-related industries into that job fair, and on the other side is to get more of our students to attend. And I'm not sure if it's because our students are being placed pretty well already, but there's not a lot of ag students that attend the university job fair. Like, they're not needing to look for a job. I don't know, but that certainly is some area that we need to emphasize.
Just one quick follow-up. So another question I might have then, Lori, is do you hear much from once you graduate your students out of the ag college, do you follow them to see how they're doing? Do you get feedback from them? Where are you in that situation?
I think that as a whole, the university and including our college does a very poor job of that. That's something that's on our list. It's difficult to keep track of students once they leave. They lose their University of Wyoming email. We can track some of them through other electronic means like Facebook, for instance, but it's very hard to keep track of students unless they're a member of the Alumni Association, and then we have good contact information. And Ann Leonard and I, in fact, have looked a little bit into the addresses that we have and contact information we have for our former students. That's another area where I think we are missing the boat on keeping track of students, and a lot of those students would support us in not just monetarily, but in other ways. So we need to do a better job in that area also.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Go ahead.
So again, we are focusing on our students. All of our programs, whether the research, outreach, or teaching, are focused on developing our next generation of professionals for our field. Because if we don't train people for agriculture, nobody else is going to do that. So a very strong focus for us. We are building out programs in undergraduate and graduate excellence. A lot of this is tied with scholarship funding and some of our endowment funding. We're building collaborations with community colleges. One of the programs that I thought was particularly good that I had a chance to see this summer were the undergraduate research interns from the community college near Torrington, when the students were working at the Sarek Center, and they're being pipelined into programs at the University of Wyoming. So I know this is a program we also have at Sheridan. It works quite well. We also have program transfer guides that we've worked on with our community college partners to make it easier for our students out in Wyoming to transfer into the University of Wyoming to complete a 4-year degree. And we're looking at removing impediments that are in the college, trying to identify and remove any impediments that we might have within our college that prevent our students from graduating in a 4-year period. So we're very much focused on trying to improve our graduation rates and improve students' satisfaction with our programs overall. So we are looking to rebuild teaching capacity in a number of areas. From a disciplinary type focus, this isn't necessarily a departmental focus. We are looking at rangeland resources, livestock management, crops, forage, weeds, invasive species, those types of areas, livestock health, and then rural community vitality and health that would include programs in human development, fashion, small industry type activities, and early childhood education. So we're looking at this as an integrated whole, in the sense that if we have healthy rural communities and healthy agricultural systems, Wyoming will be strong. We are revamping our undergraduate and graduate curriculum in a number of our fields, focusing on providing some additional distance and hybrid course offerings. Some of the distance degree and certificates that we're working on right now are one in plant science, which would be offered across the state. Invasive species, which would be a post-baccalaureate program. Computational biology out of our molecular biology group, which would provide professionals in agriculture and the biological sciences with the math and data handling skills they would need to be able to manage large data sets, which is a very important aspect now to many things that we're doing in agriculture and resource management. And then with our early childhood education programs. So this just gives you a list of the departments that are in our college, and I'm really grateful that so many of our chairs are here. So I think Ben Rashford from Ag Econ is here. He's here as well. Dr. Badar, who we introduced earlier. Scott Miller, who grateful for Scott's input this morning. Chrissy from Family and Consumer Science, and then Andrew from Plant Science, and Jonathan from Veterinary Science are here today. The programs we have highlighted here in red are the ones where we've had the greatest impact and loss of faculty over the past few years, particularly in animal science and plant sciences, where we've had our greatest loss in capacity. So we're hoping with the CPM request and with support from the legislature, we'll be able to refocus and rebuild these programs. Just want to give you a little bit of background on our Wyoming Agriculture Initiative. So we're going to be focusing on livestock and forage production systems from a research, teaching, and extension perspective, so very integrated type of program. And here are some of the things that we're going to be focusing on here. So besides the constraints of working at high altitudes, we're looking at rangeland, ranch management issues. We do have teaching programs in these areas. We're going to build those out. Forage issues, livestock, wildlife health, a strong program in vet science in these areas. Agribusiness decision-making, our focus on reclamation activities with Dr. Stahl and his group, and then issues associated with water and watershed and soils that are important here in Wyoming as a headwater state. We have been focusing, I know there's a program that has been kicked around for a little while called the Cheatgrass Initiative. We've actually built that out a little bit. Dr. Rachel and Brian Mueller have been leading that along with John Ritton and other folks in plant science and other programs across our college. And we have a white paper on what we're calling now an Institute for the Management of Annual Grasses and Natural Ecosystems, which would be a research, teaching, and extension program looking for solutions on a landscape scale to some of the issues that we're facing in rangeland and ranch management associated with invasive species. From a rural community vitality and health perspective, the focus of this initiative is primarily on teaching, but also on outreach into the communities. The major focus of this is going to be on educational programs for teachers and other educational professionals pre-K through grade 8. So working with the College of Education to put a program together for teacher certification that would cover this entire range. And then rebuilding out our community development and nutrition programs in the state through our extension and programming. Major emphasis that I've had since I came here, I view extension as being critical to the university's ability to reach its citizens across the state. We're focusing on rebuilding capacity in our counties, and hiring extension educators is a high priority. I think that's a high priority for President Theobald as well. But instead of just putting people in a county just willy-nilly, not based on any strategic initiatives or strategic plan, we're looking at refilling these extension educator positions as members of an interdisciplinary team that's tied to our strategic initiatives. And we see this as, if we can get the resources to rebuild our extension educator workforce, that we'll be able to use these folks to provide a platform for university statewide engagement, which was a major initiative that President Nichols had and also President Theobald does as well. So just to give you some idea of what the impact has been to our field-based extension personnel from 2013 to now, you can see that because in part from the county support that we do receive, that our youth development programs haven't been impacted directly. They have indirectly for sure, but we've had major losses in our rangeland, agriculture, horticulture, nutrition, food safety, and community education programs for a total loss in workforce with our extension educators of about 41% over a 5-year period. So this is frightening if we can't get the resources to rebuild this capacity in our state. Question? Okay. Just want to give you a little bit of an overview of our hiring plan. So we do have some high priority faculty requests that we've put into the university. Also, along with this are some staff hires. Our highest priority are for people who are going to be able to teach and conduct research, or teach and conduct outreach, research and outreach across the missions of our college and our land grant mission, and address our strategic initiatives. We're also looking at building out graduate student stipends in the sense that these individuals will be teaching in our undergraduate programs, but they'll also be forming the basis for our research programs as well. So here are just some of our top priorities. I did submit a list to the president for 34 faculty and extension positions. I'm sure that we're not going to be able to fill all of those through the CPM request, but at least what it does is it gives us an idea of where we are and where we want to go, and then we have these priorities ordered based upon our strategic initiatives. So we do have some animal science positions shown in brown, and whether these positions contribute to the research, teaching, or extension mission of the university. Our veterinary science head, a number of two extension associate directors, 10 extension educators that would be out in the field, farm and ranch management professor for agriculture economics program, rangeland for ESM, plant science program that will also be involved with our invasive species initiative. So we are currently conducting a search for the Whitney chair. I hope to have that filled. The lecturer in that position would be tied in closely with our plant science undergraduate program, hope to get that launched. Do have two positions in family consumer science, one in human nutrition, which is critical for our community resilience program, in addition to maintaining accreditation in nutrition, along with fashion merchandising, which we consider to be a major growth area for the college moving into the future. Replacement for Dr. Tex Taylor, I'm sure everybody knows Tex, and then an associate director for our experiment station, and then another position here, more fundamental in animal science. So this is just our top tier of hires. And we do have this a plan available.
Senator Moniz,
Chair,
go ahead.
Ms. Reese.
Is there some relevance to the colors of your positions here? Brown, green, blue, black?
Oh,
Is
yes,
that a
I'm sorry
priority list
about
or
that.
just-
Those are departments. Those are department designations.
Oh, okay.
So all the animal science people are brown, veterinary
Okay.
science are light green,
I was trying
extension
to
is blue. I'm
understand.
sorry, I should have made that
So is that
clear.
a priority list or just a list?
We do have a prioritized list, and these are pretty much rank ordered as far as our top priorities. Our faculty, we have been fortunate in being able to participate in some of university-wide initiatives. One of these are the potential assignment of up to 13 of our faculty members cutting across molecular biology, plant science, ecosystems, science management, and animal science into the science initiative building whenever that gets launched. We do have some faculty who are working on interdisciplinary programs in data science. And we're looking at this university-wide initiative to generate research that's going to have major impact on some of our agricultural problems across the state. As far as infrastructure needs, we're only going to address two of them here today. One is major renovation of our Ag C building. This building was constructed in 1949. And we'll take a tour of it this morning, a little bit later, have a chance to walk through that. So the physical structure of it is just starting to deteriorate from deferred maintenance. Major concern I have now with students, all the students back on campus, is frankly with the plumbing in the building, it's just substandard, in addition to the HVAC system. Those are my two major concerns. We do have a lack, though, too, of functional modern teaching space. We have a number of microbiology labs and veterinary science labs that are conducted in that building, and the research space is from the early 1970s, and there are some problems with that space. Also going to visit the Laramie R&E Center. We have been, yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Carry on.
Yes. Okay. For the Laramie R&E Center. So we have had some, over the years, have had some site analyses done on this property with some ideas of what it would take to get to the upgrades that we need to be able to do first-rate animal science and plant science research at these facilities. They're nice facilities to have proximate to campus, very important to our teaching mission, particularly in animal and plant sciences. But we do need some support to get these facilities renovated. We're also a 40-acre site with animal facilities adjacent to the Washington State Veterinary Lab that also needs some significant attention. So, just in summary, just wanted to go over some of the priorities that we have moving forward for the college.
Senator Bowman.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now I'm ready, Mr. Chairman. With the infrastructure, I guess maybe we need somebody from the university to answer this question. So why are we hearing about $75 million for athletics when we have academic needs for infrastructure? It seems to me that we're going through this. We've just been through a serious cut. Our land grant function here in the Ag College got disproportionately cut, and yet here we are continuing the same song and dance where we forget what our priorities are as far as I'm concerned. So I understand maybe you're not in a position to answer that question, and I'm just wondering how that came to be. If anybody from the university can explain how we're prioritizing these building projects for athletics when we have needs for a land grant function, that'd be really helpful. And if nobody's there, then,
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I can't speak on behalf of our trustees who vote and put the priorities forward. But I can tell you that about the ag building and the ag building on Prexy's pasture is that we are in the final stages of a 20-year campus master plan for the university that our board will be hearing about from our master planners this coming next week. They will be in town to present to the trustees at their board meeting in this room next Thursday. In that master plan, you will see that the university is making a pivot toward what we are terming, again, the trustees have not adopted this plan, but it's preliminary, so I'm just going to put that out there in case any of them are listening, that it is a return to almost restore the core. And so the plan is, Senator, would be to leverage the generosity of the major maintenance dollars that are given to the university. An ag building renovation is just the exact prime project that those dollars are intended to do. And so if the trustees were to move forward with this plan, you will see that there are major renovations leveraging major maintenance dollars that we will do around the core of Prexy's to restore those historic and iconic buildings. Our first challenge to implementing that, though, is if they were to approve, is just working with, and the dean and I have just spoken a few minutes ago about creating swing space so that we can get those folks, those teams out of the College of Ag building and then put them somewhere else and get it done. That fundamentally, I think, will be our biggest challenge than necessarily leveraging major maintenance dollars to campus.
Okay. So I understand that'd be accomplished within your current budget, or at least that's the plan. I understand it's preliminary, but right now you believe that could be accomplished within your current maintenance budget. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have an estimate at all. We have not even begun that preliminary of the costs to do the ag building. I think that there are always unforeseen circumstances, and so we've got enough other projects on our plate right now. We wanted to make sure our trustees adopt this master plan and the concept. It's a philosophical change, I would say, from maybe more recent practices where we have added square footage in our research facilities, that we've been blessed to have those. But from our analysis of a space analysis, from our academic standing, that we say once we get the Science Initiative building built, we get the West Side Energy Power Plant, which is needed to power the engineering building as well as the Science Initiative building. Once we get those built from the academic space, we should have a number of those, and so of square footage that we now need to then take the steps to say, all right, what are we not missing, or where are the assessments that are needed in terms of these buildings that are older but are historic, and that we're committed to keeping them and making sure that they're there. So we need to do that analysis, and we're just not there yet because we don't want to get out in front of our trustees on a project that maybe they haven't officially adopted or approved yet.
So, and just so I understand, that's going to be, they'll be up for approval relatively soon, within a few weeks.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, our hope is that they would adopt this finalized. They will receive a presentation of a pretty far along draft next week. Then we will circulate that to our campus stakeholders. When we launched our master plan, we went out across the state. We will do that again to get feedback from communities and across the state in the month of October, with the intent that our trustees would make a formal motion and adopt that plan at their November board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
If I could follow up on so that I'm following up on your answer, so that master plan will include all of the College of Agriculture's infrastructure needs, or not?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I would say the answer to that is no. Specifically, it did not incorporate. It is a high-level structural framework, is how I would put it, in terms of saying what are the mobility, how do we make campus more accessible, how do we make it more engaging, what are the types of classrooms and the space and the research facilities we need, and what's the square footage that we need, and how do we think about how students interact and move around our campus, and how does it achieve our mission. And so within that, it says, to the core, there's saying there's a good plan and good idea to renovate these buildings. The long wind up here, I apologize, where it does not get into the level of detail that it would need on specificities around the College of Ag, or any college for that instance. I would point to the Laramie R&E centers and out there at Hanson Arena or others. That would be outside the scope. That is a more specialized facility that I think needs a very specialized focus and a much more engaged, localized stakeholders and discussions. And so it doesn't include anything along those lines. And that's why I would say it is not a comprehensive infrastructure plan for the College of Agriculture. Excuse me.
So follow up, Mr. Chairman. So based on that answer, where does the College of Agriculture's infrastructure plan fit in the budgeting process? It's going to be 2 or 3 years before we see a plan from the College of Agriculture on your infrastructure needs. We're going to see it next year. When are we going to see it?
We're in the process of doing a needs assessment across the college to determine what needs to be fixed. We've got a good start on that at the Laramie R&E Center. We don't have firm numbers for any of that, but we are trying to get some good indications of what it was going to take to actually renovate these facilities, so we could do it in stages. Like Mr. Jewell mentioned, the Ag-C program is going to be part of a larger campus-wide effort. I'm just not sure where the College of Ag is going to be on that priority list nationally, university-wide.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I would just follow up and say, just candidly, we needed to get a permanent dean and her vision and her leadership here before we can move forward, Senator. I think as you're hearing Barbara in a very short period, Dean Rasco, and I apologize, in a short period of time has hit the ground running at full speed. She is engaging. We are excited about her vision that she's starting to outline today. She's building her team. I think you heard a lot of introductions around interim this, and they're working on getting that stability there. We are a people business, and we need quality people and quality leadership in our College of Ag. We are getting there, and the dean has a plan for that. And so we're 10 weeks into her deanship, and we're working with her as quickly as we can to make sure that what we do meets the programmatic and the strategic future of the College of Agriculture. Once we have that vision, then we can determine what infrastructure and buildings do you need to execute that vision.
We appreciate that vision, and we're as excited as you are about it, but we are anticipating seeing some sort of a plan in the future. And some of these I think we could see sooner than later, but we understand, Dean Rasco, that you're drinking out of a fire hose and you're trying to get there, and you've got a budget session coming up. It would be nice if when is your budget due to the governor?
Mr. Chairman, we will be meeting with the governor's office, not the governor, but his staff early next week, and then our budget hearing with him is September 25th is what it's scheduled for, the afternoon of that. And we are, as we have things come forward in our plans, they will come forward as well, but we want to make sure that they are well thought out. And so it is a sense of urgency for us and a vision, and where we're making those investments in are not only the faculty hiring that we can do, but also the infrastructure needs as we can get them up on off the ground and get a plan around them.
Senator Steinmetz. Senator Dominguez, do you have a follow-up yet? Okay, Senator Steinmetz, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just guess in the progression of things, I just have a question as far as if the trustees are voting on a master plan now, but we don't have the College of Ag plan done yet, do we have kind of a placeholder there to ensure that we'll be included in some way rather than, to me, we're looking at wants versus needs. We have 3 big industries in our state that fund everything, which is our minerals, our ag, and our tourism. And so those are critical to us, and where we've seen a lot built up, and we toured the pool and all of those things, and the needs that wants we're talking about there, to me, they don't arise to the level of a need where our ag college does. And so I just want to make sure that we're in place where we need to be when our trustees are voting on this master plan for the college. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yes. So the College of Ag and every college in a unit really is a part of this master plan. So I don't want to underplay it either. It is comprehensive, but it does not necessarily go down to the granularity of saying what is the type of programming that needs to occur and the structures at the beef unit, at the sheep unit. How does we vision about Hanson Arena? How does it play into our hay fields and our experiment stations? And so it's not that granular at that level, but it does include the College of Ag and say from a space needs perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, how do we begin to sequence some of these buildings, and what is the order in which we might go about doing them? The College of Ag is there. That building is if not the top, it's at very close to the top in terms of the sequencing of our plans, and that reflects not only the priority and the thoughtfulness of our master plan and planners, but also of the leadership of the university and our trustees that it's there. So there is a prominence in the plan. It's just the next level to say, what exactly do you need? What do we need to do, and how do we get that done in that timeline? That's where Barbara's working with her team to put those specifics together that are concrete, that you could move forward with and have a more engaged and thoughtful discussion about exact buildings and layouts and plans and infrastructure needs.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your concern. I'm very, encouraged that we're going to be able to get some of our infrastructure needs met, and I'm grateful to the committee here for recognizing the importance of our academic mission at the university and why that should be preeminent over maybe some other requests. So that's all I have. So if there are any questions?
Do we have Representative Clausen?
So, Mr. Chairman, so I look at this and I hear this rebuild focus for the College of Agriculture in the state of Wyoming. And has there been any thought to, instead of a rebuild mission, is what does the College of Agriculture of the future need to look like? Because some of this stuff, extension, I mean, those are 1950s programs. Do we need to take a look at 2020's tomorrow? Has there been thought to what does the 2020 Department of Ag need to look like?
That's what we're focusing on. That's why we've done so much strategic visioning over the last couple months here at the university within our units in the college, is we're focusing on where the puck is going, not where the puck has been. One of the good things about having so many vacant positions is it gives you an opportunity to refocus and look at what is, what the future is instead of just backfilling what we had in the past. But we do have, because of the cuts, we do have some foundational needs that we have to reestablish. There's certain positions we absolutely have to fill, or we're not going to be able to offer certain core large enrollment undergraduate programs, whether that's in nutrition, whether it's in animal science, or whether it's in agricultural economics and business. So there's certain foundational needs that we have to meet, and then what we're doing though with these foundational rebuild is looking strategically to the future where the field is going with our hiring plans. So Lori, do you have any comments on that?
Maybe just a couple. And Representative Clausen, that's, your thoughts there, or your comment there is exactly what we've been doing for the last 10 weeks. Is maybe rebuild is the wrong word we use, but refocus, reimagine. We, as Dean Rasko said, we need a foundation from which to operate from, and our foundation in terms of personnel and over time infrastructure has been eroded significantly. So we need to get that foundation back up so we can function at a level that our state frankly deserves. Now, in doing that, we're not looking back at the people we had and saying we need to replace all those people with people that have similar disciplines and similar knowledge. We're looking forward to say, and the process was fairly robust. Dean Rasko asked all the departments to put forward their highest priority positions, and then at the college level, we looked at those positions and we rearranged those based on the future and how we can meet the needs of the future, not how it was in the past. So I think what you're thinking and what we're thinking is exactly the same.
Anything further? Further questions? Okay, well, I think in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and keep moving forward, but thank you very much, Dean Rasko, for your presentation, and we look forward to the tour later today and seeing some of this for ourselves, so thank you guys very much for presenting.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next up, we have our, well, I guess before we go to our bill that we have before us, is there any public comment? And I apologize, I should have asked that before we took a break. But any public comment out there before we move forward? Okay, going once, going twice. All right, public comment is closed. So, well, up next before us, we have a proposed piece of legislation, a report from the College of Agriculture. This is LSO 0148. And Josh, Mr. Anderson, if you'd like to come forward and walk us through the bill. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh Anderson, LSO. This bill is a request out of our first meeting up in Sheridan. Just goes in and creates a new section. Says on or before October 1st of each year, University of Wyoming-College of Agriculture shall report the annual revenue and expenses of the college to the Joint Agriculture Committee and the Joint Appropriations Committee. So very straightforward there. You'll see a staff comment down below. There's a pretty comprehensive full university report that goes to the governor along with their budget requests every year. They're in 21-17-205, so just wanted to highlight that to the committee, but otherwise stand for any questions.
Thank you, Josh. Committee, any questions? Any questions for Josh? All right, thank you very much. All right, committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Senator Boner, seconded by Senator Steinmetz. And I know, go ahead, Senator, I know you got a couple of ideas.
Right, and so committee, as we, we've heard a lot from the university, we've had an opportunity for lots of good information, and, I think that we're, kind of at a juncture here, of understanding what happened in the past, but we have to also be forward-thinking and look at, I hope everybody agrees that, the College of Agriculture took a disproportionately large cut. And so our focus, I think, should be not just on preventing something, the exact same happening in the future, but, also making sure that we prioritize the land grant mission of the university and be forward-thinking and consider maybe next time it's the College of Engineering or military science. As we heard, those are the other two land grant functions of the university. So what I was considering with this draft bill is, keep the same concept. We're going to, make sure that we highlight the functions that we recognize as being different and a fundamental part of the university. And making sure that we have that direct line to appropriations where the big decisions get made, and with hopes that aspiring accountability that the university is forced to focus on those land grant functions. But my idea would be to ensure that all land grant functions are covered in the report, not just College of Agriculture. So once again, we'd be adding College of Engineering as well as Military Science and Aerospace Studies, which are the ROTC programs here at the university. So those would be the three functions that we'd require the report for. We have some discussion, I think, as to the exact timing of the report, whether October 1st is the right idea. So we'd be doing basically concurrent with that budget request going to the governor, but also be separate from the overall appropriations process. So it would be distinct in that regard if we make it by October 1st. Hopefully, so we have some discussion there. We also have some discussion as whether we just want the expenses and revenue, as is in the report, or we want to add the general condition of each college, each function there, and make it a little bit broader, while still calling out specifically the expenses and revenue. So a lot of options there. Look forward to the discussion if anybody has any input.
Yes.
I guess I don't mind following. I would agree that as the bill reads, it's pretty vague, actually. In other words, we're talking about the annual revenue and expenses of the College of Agriculture. That could be a two-liner. And so I think we need to be a little more explicit on what it is we expect to receive from the University of Wyoming. My thoughts would be that it would be very similar to what they submit to the Joint Appropriations Committee. We don't want the university's budget, we want the College of Agriculture's budget, but we want to see what the College of Agriculture would submit to the Appropriations Committee. So a detailed budget, maybe even a line item budget of what they will submit during either a supplemental budget or during a budget year, but a detailed budget of the College of Agriculture, as opposed to just revenue and expenses.
Thank you, Senator. And I guess to that point, and I fully agree, but is there a standard, do you know, that appropriations currently uses to get all of the details that they find adequate? I guess what I'm asking is, as far as language goes, to make that more specific, is there existing language that JAC uses to get all that information, or do you have anything specific in mind to make that more detailed?
Well, I think the university submits what they want us to see. I would think the College of Agriculture would do something similar. Josh, do you have a feel for that?
Mr. Chairman, there is some standard language we could use that if we wanted to see something like what they provide to A&I and the governor with their first budget request, we could use some of that same language.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I suggest we do that, and obviously we don't have it in front of us, well, I guess we could vote on it in concept, and then look at the details of it at our next meeting. That's my suggestion.
Sorry, there. No, Senator, that sounds good. So perhaps that's something we want to just draft up as a concept to have more discussion about at the October meeting, Josh. Thank you. Yes, Representative Simpson.
Mr. Chairman, I question whether it's a good idea to include the report being distributed to the JAC. I think it's really kind of random that the JAC would receive one college report out of all the colleges in the university. And I'm guessing that they're just going to just flippantly throw it away because it really is going to be meaningless to them. I think it should come to us and we can understand it, compare it to previous years, work with it, and be a working tool for us. But I think the JAC would find it just a waste of time, and I doubt that they would have any value in it.
Senator Bonner?
Okay, yeah, and that would be the question we have. If we do change it all to all land grant functions, is it appropriate still to bring it just to this committee? Do we bring it to minerals too and education? So that would be the question. If we do broaden it outside the scope of just agriculture, what other committees, but then again, it's be a little unreasonable to have them present to 4 different committees. And so I could tell you that after, at least from my perspective, I did hear back from the Senate Chair of Appropriations. He seemed very interested. Perhaps that interest would ebb and flow over the years, depending on who's there. I think the value of the report is that it does force the university to look at only those land grant functions. And just from a practical perspective, I agree that that is a concern. That as with any report, it could be disregarded relatively easily once the immediate crisis is passed. But I think the idea that just the function, just the exercise of jumping through those hoops would require by necessity the university focus on those areas just by submitting the report and doing that. So that's the value I see in it. I agree that that would be the drawback. Here's just another report that that any committee might just kind of throw away. But I think there's value in at least having that communication and guaranteeing that communication. So that was my perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. I guess to that effect, I can certainly see where if you're expanding that to ROTC and the military sciences, then that would obviously spark the interests of transportation and military affairs, and so on and so forth, and on down the line. My one question or possible concern is, regardless of what the feedback has been from members of other committees, generally, just to use Education Committee as an example, when they ask for a report, it is specifically to the Education Committee. Are we going to run into, does anybody think, and just chime in, that we're going to run into opposition with the broader body of, here is the Ag Committee coming with a bill wanting to dump a report on all of our other committees that we didn't necessarily have any discretion or input in. And so I'm not saying that we can't do that. I don't think there's anything that would preclude us from doing it. I'm just saying I think that's something we need to consider is we're about to put forward a potential report that we want to send to potentially every other committee when it's only come out of us. So I don't know, Representative Simpson, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid concern. Really, that kind of legislation should come out of the Education Committee, not us. Okay. If we want a committee for us, or a report for us, we ought to specify it's for us and not try to get so broad that we're interacting with other departments and other committees.
Yes, Senator Bonner.
Mr. Chair, I agree that's as a concern. I also, talked briefly with our Education Committee chairpersons, and I didn't hear any negative response to it. I agree that, I sent them all an email right after we drafted the bill to make sure that it had any feedback, and the only feedback I received was positive, and that was from one of our appropriations chairs. So I agree with that concern. That's why I have myself, which is why I reached out to everybody affected. But here we are, we're the Ag Committee, and we're in an area that is generally under the purview of education. I think there's a reason for that. We recognize that, and that's not an excuse to do nothing either. You can make that argument for anything that we do here just because it generally falls under appropriations or education. I think we have a charge to get to understand a lot of the details as to what happened with the College of Agriculture, and if our idea is to provide a slightly more oversight for College of Agriculture, then, why not be proactive and extend it to all other land grant functions as well, because who knows where the next crisis may occur, and if we can prevent it by having more attention to that particular area, then I think that's a worthwhile endeavor.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your perspective. I just am sensitive about overreaching our bounds. I think the Ag Committee ought to be sponsoring legislation associated with what we do best, and that's agriculture. So to me, this piece of proposed legislation really ought to request data from the Department of Agriculture for our benefit and not try to go beyond that, would be my preference.
Any further comment? Any further comment? Okay, where are we at here? Senator Moniz has put forward that language that I think that we'll just take up at the next meeting. But do you have a specific amendment, Senator Bono or Senator Moniz?
I don't have a specific amendment. In concept, we can have Josh draft up language that would define what they're going to submit. Right now, it's fairly vague. I mean, you could do it in 2 lines. This is our revenue, this is our expenses, because that's what it says. So we need to explain what it is we want, which is a detailed budget of the College of Agriculture. And so if Josh can develop, we could vote on that in concept and then vote on it again in October possibly, or that's my thought. And I do agree with Representative Simpson. We ought to focus on agriculture, because if you start talking about land grant, engineering falls in that as well. And so now we're really talking. So I think let's focus. That's my opinion. I agree with you. I think we ought to focus on agriculture and leave it at that. That's my opinion as well. But it's up to the committee to decide what they want to do.
Representative Simpson, more. But, Senator Bouchard, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd just like to add, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chair, that keeping this simple is the best thing, and then it can go over to the other committees as we need to send it. We've done a lot of legislation that we've had to go back up and change reports because we've added all these reports that get sent and made. So it's just simple to do this, and then anybody else that needs to request it would be would be sent. I mean, so I think simple is best.
Senator Bonner?
Mr. Chairman, I would think perhaps it may just be acceptable to everybody on the committee, just change the titles to, instead of College of Agriculture Report, UW Land Grant Mission Report, and retain the substance of the bill. That way we have the flexibility of adding other land grant functions as it goes through the process, but we do have an opportunity to get other, serious input from our colleagues. And so we have the flexibility there. We keep the actual text of the bill the way it is, focused only on the College of Agriculture, but acknowledge that there is interest in expanding the report to other land grant functions, so we can have that discussion during the session. And instead of speculating as to, whether it's an issue for other committees or not, we can just have that discussion as it goes through the process. But perhaps that would be a good compromise.
Representative Simpson.
I can work with that. So do we need to vote to make sure that we're getting a consensus on this? Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we adjust the title appropriately, but inside the body, we keep it relatively simple by asking for a report from the Department of Agriculture, and that it be brought to the Agriculture Committee by October 1st.
So did you make that motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Senator Bonner?
Okay, Senator Moniz did, but
Go ahead.
And so to be clear, we'd be basically deleting appropriations out of it. Is that part of the?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Good. Okay. Good.
All right. So that has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion, committee, on that amendment? Going once, going twice. Question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, that amendment has been adopted. Any further amendments?
Do you want to make your? And so, Mr. Chairman, I guess the question is if if all we're left with, the only open question in my mind is, are we able to allow LSO to put language in there as far as the substance of the report? The intent is, if the intent is clear, we want a similar level of detail that they would get at appropriations. The question is, do we defer this bill to our October meeting where we have like 5 or 6 bills we already deferred, or do we trust LSO to make that, make the language, understand our intent to make the appropriate changes without dictating the exact words that we need? So that's the question for the committee. Basically, do we want, are we going to vote on for sponsorship now, or are we going to, defer again to the October meeting? So that's, I think, in my mind, that's the only open question we have.
I would agree. I think we ought to let Josh develop the language, and then take a look at it in October. We probably won't change it, but we might, and I don't think it's going to take long to look at it and say, yeah, we like it. Maybe 5 minutes. And if you can get it to us ahead of time, we'll have an opportunity to peruse it before we get there, and we'll already know what we think when we get there.
All right. Any further comment on that, committee? Okay, is there...
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bonner.
So along those lines, I move that we direct LSO to make an amendment for along those lines, and and to defer table this bill, voting on this bill until the next meeting.
Okay. Before we move on that, Senator, let's go to public comment, and we probably should have done that. But anyway, any public comment before we take an action one way or the other on this? Yes, Meredith, do you have something, please?
Mr. Chairman, Meredith Acey, Director of Government Relations for the University of Wyoming. I stood up for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to just be available for questions from the committee on the other reports that the university sends to the legislature. It varies year to year. However, this year we are submitting 26 reports to the legislature on a variety of different topics. So adding another report will be fine. That all runs through my office, and then I work with the experts in the area, and then we get it back into the legislature. But one thing I would ask, and I think from the conversation you're getting there, is for clarity. It's very difficult years down the road to look at the statutes and try to say, okay, what is it that they want in this report? And so when the statute is clear, it's very easy just to read the statute and to abide by the statute, and then we move forward. The other reason I stood up is I think there's maybe a disconnect between what you want and what you may be getting to in the language, and that is and David will probably have to come up and give you a little bit more specifics on this, but what we submit to the Joint Appropriations Committee is very similar to what state agencies submit, and it has to do with our state appropriations, but that is not all of the revenue that we get at the University of Wyoming. So what you want potentially, or what I think you want, is the College of Ag budget that goes to our Board of Trustees, that is approved by our Board of Trustees, and that would include a lot of the other types of funding beyond the state block grant funds and the state general funds. So that's going to be different than anything that we submit to the Joint Appropriations Committee.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, just building off of that is then another layer of clarity is, are you looking for a budget or are you looking for actuals that come, so I mean, I gave you both today in those reports, a budget versus actual is, I guess, a third option. Again, what we submit to the Joint Appropriations Committee goes through the state's IBARS system, of which how we submit and develop our budgets. It doesn't have all of the fields that I showed you today because of the way that the university is funded via its block grant. It just doesn't allow us to put all those different types of revenues that we generate in there at any level of detail that you saw today. So if it's not that, and that's a budget report, right? And so is this then something else similar to maybe the things we saw today? Is it on actuals? Is it budget versus actuals? Is it looking a year ahead or are you looking a year back? all are doable. It's just, as you think through this, if we can, more than happy to make it the 27th report, we'll do. It's, those types of things would be helpful for us to know as you think through the bill. So I agree, simplicity is great, but it's wide open right now as it's written for interpretation. That I'm not quite clear exactly what you're looking for, and that would be helpful as you flesh it out.
Senator, you have money, go
Just
ahead.
to follow up, David, on the reason we asked for a budget 101 is because the lack of understanding of the entire budget process for the University of Wyoming and the College of Agriculture. The block grant is all this committee is familiar with, because that's all they see during the budget process. We want to see the big picture. In other words, all of the funding sources, expenses and revenue for the College of Agriculture through all of the funding sources. That's what we want to see. However we draft that language, maybe Josh can get with the two of you and develop some sort of language that we could look at that would meet our needs. And then we could see it prior to our meeting, and we'll then have a good feel for that.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Simpson?
Mr. Chair, on this document you presented today, the Management Financial Report, page 16 is the Department of Agriculture. Does that not have all the data that Senator Moniz just referenced?
Mr. Chairman, it would have it all, but it does not have, we can easily add that to that, but it does not have the externally sponsored awards, which those are and maybe I'm coming at, those are of great variability. So whether they get an NSF grant or NIH grant, and so if you, to Senator Moniz, to your point, if you're wanting to see all sources of revenue, we can add that in, and we have it at that level. When you talk about budgets for those, because every individual project, the thousands of those sponsored projects we have their own budgets, the system controls it. It's just when you try to roll it up and estimate what that budget's going to be, I mean, year over year. Dr. Puri just received an $8 million Department of Energy grant, right? And it's not in our current operating budget. Our trustees, there are other processes that govern that in terms of it was submitted and approved. So we can add that data in terms of those externally sponsored. It's a critical component of the College of Agriculture and our University of Research mission. It's just that's where if the report you're asking for was based upon actuals, you would have a much greater picture and clarity of what actually occurred. For a budget in that area, it will be a budget and a forecast. It just won't be as certain as the budgets that you see there, Representative, because we know what those are. Those sources of funds are more certain than on those externally sponsored grants. If that made any sense and didn't confuse it any further, I apologize.
Representative Taft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For myself personally, the College of Agriculture is important to me as it is to everybody else here. I guess what I would be looking for is that this report would make us aware of the overall university doing to the College of Agriculture what they did and dumping the major cut on the department, the College of Agriculture. So I guess what I'd like to see out of the report is that we would have a warning that this is coming down on the College of Agriculture unfairly, from my perspective. And so I guess I'd be looking for this report to at least make us aware to protect the land grant directive that I guess I expect out of the University of Wyoming towards the College of Agriculture.
Further comment, committee, on that? Meredith or Dave, do you have anything else to add? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, and I apologize, I'm freezing, so I can barely speak. But one other thing for the committee to consider is some of the other reports do get into more narrative discussions. And so just to consider that and College of Ag is probably not going to be excited about this, but if you want a narrative about goals or more of an annual report, or just expenditures. Again, we'd just like that clarity in the statute, whatever the decision of the committee is.
I would say both.
Preferably, yeah.
And for instance, SER, School of Energy Resources, does an annual report every year, and it specifically says SER's expenditures, accomplishments, and benefits to Wyoming's energy economy. So again, just if you'd consider what you want, put it in statute as clear as possible, and then we'll do our best to meet your expectations.
Mr. Chairman, I would just say that I agree with that, but I'd like to see our staff, or Josh, get together with Meredith and David and develop some language that'll meet their needs and our needs as well.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, we can do that, and I would offer, just to we can work with Josh to tell him that one of the greatest, I think, if you think through one of the things you want in the report in terms of predictors of future uncertainty within the College of Ag. I was not here when these cuts occurred, but I was brought up to speed. I don't think there was any intentional plan, and I didn't mention this earlier, and I apologize, but as an idea that you may want to look at is the central factor to the quality of any college or university is going to be on its faculty. The College of Agriculture had a disproportionate number of faculty who were nearing retirement. So when we offered our voluntary separation retirement plan, the College of Agriculture, of all the faculty that volunteered themselves to take that plan, represented 25% of all university faculty that took it and opted into the plan. That was on that individual member's own volition that they wanted to do it. So my point is I think that as you think about what you want in the report, you may want to say, give us a report on the levels of your faculty and the years of tenure of that faculty, and what are your succession planning around that faculty? How are you bringing new ones on board and generating that? In my professional opinion, take it a lot, it will be one of the most critical components in terms of not having something like this happen again, where we have so many folks in interim statuses and we're trying to backfill vacant positions. So we'll work with Josh and you all can consider it, but that might be one way to predict it.
Thank you. Committee, any further questions for Meredith or David? All right. Thank you very much. Further public comment out there? Further public comment? I think people are hunkering down more than standing up. But, all right, public comment going once, going twice. Comment is closed. Committee, I think we know what we want to do with this particular piece of legislation, but we did have an earlier motion to defer it back to the October meeting. So I don't know if that requires a formal action or not, but has been moved. I guess we'll just take that up in October. So, anything? Yeah, probably should. Okay, was there a second on that? Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's great. No, moved by Senator Bonner, seconded by Senator Moniz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay. All right. We will take that up as well in October. And that there, other than public comments on general issues, concludes our agenda, I believe. Senator Representative Clausen, do you have something? Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I got two issues I'd like to ask for. I'd like to ask at our October meeting from the University of Wyoming that we have an update on the endowment, the $500,000 endowment, where they're at on that, and an update on the $500,000 for the rodeo facilities.
Okay. Meredith, you got that? Okay. Committee, anything further? I know Senator Steinmetz, there was supposed to be another conference call meeting on the canal back in Goshen County that was apparently canceled for the day, but is there anything further that you would like to add as far as that general situation to the committee, just to give them a brief update, or not, one way or the other?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we appreciate all the concern from across the state and all the support we've received on this issue. We did return water to the canal, I believe, on the 28th, and we had a pizza party there one evening and watched the water come down the canal, and it was pretty rewarding. And so just kudos to our irrigation district boards and our farmers who've been the boots on the ground and made this happen, and selected a great crew from SAK. So we basically ended up with 3 projects in one. We had the tunnel repair, the canal repair, and then on top of the tunnel, there ended up being another project. Because that was such sandy soil, we had to move all of that back and put some huge boxes in to keep that sand off the top of the tunnel in order to maintain the safety of our workers within the tunnel and secure the structure. So it ended up being quite a project. I think the price tag will be around $4 million for this temporary fix. We went into the tunnel and ribbed the tunnel with steel and drilled holes, 3-inch holes, and put grout in those holes in all the areas that were affected. About 100 feet in, we started with 4 ribs, and then we walked in, there were 2 collapses. The first one was a 4x4 collapse in the top of the 14-foot tunnel that was there since it was built in 1917, so it's 102 years old. And so the 4x4, we ribbed that, and along the top, they are putting steel I-beams and then putting slats of wood up in there to also secure that. It's a very temporary fix. There is a crack that goes all the way along as well. And then the second cave-in was 4 foot by 16 foot, so it was pretty massive. And if you look above, there's wooden slats that you're still seeing the light of day, and those boxes on top are keeping the sand off, because we basically have our own little coal mine area up there now, and we had the big haul trucks and everything to get that dirt moved so that we could clear that, because it's just sandy soil, and it was just running in like a sieve on top of our tunnel. So So that was the tunnel construction. The canal repair was completed before the tunnel, and that is a very secure, we moved about 5 hills of dirt to fill in that canal breach that occurred. So those are the 3 projects that are completed. The water is running. We're hopeful to get maybe another cutting of hay out of the deal, and some of the corn looks pretty good, some doesn't. So we're really thankful. We're thankful that the crop insurance is going to pay out, and that was a big issue, and our federal delegation worked very hard on that for us, so we're thankful for that. But we still are grappling with the $4 million of funding. There is no emergency funding for issues like this. The governor didn't have it within his budget to just move some money to us and just give that to us. There is nothing through the mineral royalty grant. The Attorney General found that an irrigation district doesn't qualify for that. They're looking at the Clean Water Revolving Fund, which would have a 50% repayment on that. And then the Bureau of Reclamation has come through with a 30 or a 50-year loan, and it's a 35% split between the 3 entities, which would be the Goshen Irrigation District, the Gearing-Fort Laramie Irrigation District, which is in Nebraska, and the Bureau of Reclamation. However, the Bureau of Reclamation does hold title to this facility, and how we deal with this issue going forward is going to be a bellwether issue for our state, because they hold title and they control when the water is in the canal. They control how we can repair the tunnel and the canal system. We have 2 more tunnels on this system that are 102 years old, and we have a lot of aging infrastructure across the state. So that's something we need to be aware of as a state and as legislators, is how are we going to deal with the Bureau of Reclamation in the future, and what is their liability and responsibility in these issues. The Select Water and Wyoming Water Development met up in Buffalo. They will be advancing a bill for us into this legislative session that'll take us through the planning and construction phase, which would normally take a lot longer. And they will also be proposing a bill to create an emergency account for situations like this that we'll probably be facing in the future with some of our other infrastructure and irrigation districts. And the details for that are not yet complete. There are two ideas, possibly an assessment from the irrigation districts that would work a little bit like the fire suppression account where they pay in a little bit and have some skin in the game, but also the ability for the governor and Water Development Commission to be able to utilize funds that are in water development accounts and draw from them in an emergency situation. So that's kind of our update, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to visit with you about it. And again, thanks for all your help. Everyone's been great.
Thank you, Senator. Committee, anything further that you would like to add? Representative Clausen, you had an idea?
So, Mr. Chairman, when we look at this UW issue we're working on, especially on the facilities side, I think that down the road we're going to be, or we're going to receive an extraordinary ask, especially for the infrastructure side of this. I mean, it's fairly apparent because of the, I would say, maintenance backlog on some of the ag's old or aging infrastructure. I think we should take a look at redundancies we have around the state, and I think some of these gaps have been filled up by some of our community college system. I really think rebuilding the entire thing the way it looked like in 1975 or 1999 or 2005 is not a wise option. I think if we were an 1890s legislature, we would look at having everything in the University of Wyoming. But in a 2020 system, I think we have some redundancies around the state that we need to take a look at before we delve into just going on a rebuilding spree. And I think we should. I don't know if we can get a bill draft like that, but I think that's something we should take a major look at. I would propose a bill draft if we can come up with something, maybe even a study.
I guess along those lines, are you wanting to put forward a proposal now, or do you want to get with Josh to see if to try and bring something in October?
Mr. Chairman, would we need a placeholder right now in order to act on it in?
Well, I suppose we would. We'd have to know what the draft bill would be. Are you proposing a bill to study the land grant functions of the university or the College of Agriculture, and how that, in the ways in which those functions are being accomplished by another entity? Or
I think it would be more along the lines of what infrastructure we already have, physical infrastructure we already have around the state that could take care of some of these needs that, I mean, we can see coming up the way.
And so I guess, sorry, Mr. Chairman, would that be accomplished, I mean, once we have it looks like they're going through a process of beginning to identify those needs or those wants right now? Would we want to report on that once the progress of that process, once they have a chance to present it to the trustees, and we'll have a lot more information by October, that since we're going to be coming up to Du Bois anyways for our other bill draft, perhaps that'd be a good agenda item, is to see the status of that strategic plan and how it's coming together. And I mean, I think we're the ones with the expertise as to how, perhaps those functions may or may not already be being accomplished throughout the state, and recognize that we're not going to be doing anything this session along those lines. I mean, would that alleviate the concerns? Or
Senator Steinmetz, yep.
Mr. Chairman, just a thought for you, Representative Clausen. What if we had the community colleges weigh in as far as what their inventory is in their ag program infrastructure, and then if we could get the community colleges to weigh in and give us the information of what exists, then maybe we could put those two things together as a committee and look them over.
To that end, because I don't think it's a bad idea, but with there not necessarily being any community college folks here today, do we want to, is that something that Josh would want to reach out to him between now and October? I don't know how much of an undertaking that would be either for him or for them, but I'm just being mindful of the fact that there's, 6 or 7 weeks between now and the next meeting. How much can we reasonably ask of them to put together to give to us between now and then? But if we want to try and make that attempt, I would certainly support the idea. Is that, Josh, do you think that that's reasonable? Can you, on your end?
Mr. Chairman, certainly if you guys decide that you want an update maybe from the university on their planning process, and then we could also invite community colleges to participate. As you noted, it's relatively short time. I don't know necessarily what we'd get, but we can certainly reach out to them and see what they can provide.
I guess it would be my preference. I mean, obviously, the university has heard an earful here the last couple of days, but if you could at least reach out to the community colleges and see what additional input they could provide along those lines, and also extend an invite to them for the October meeting, so that they're at least there, then that would be a good start. I don't know, Senator Steinmetz or Representative Clausen, is that along the lines of what you have in mind?
Yeah, and I think looking at EWC, it would be a pretty easy ask. We're building the ATEC building now. They're looking at what programs it will house. I'm not saying they should give us a detailed report and a budget or anything like that, but just here's our facilities, here's the programs we're going to have, and that shouldn't be too hard, wouldn't it be, in their classes they offer in their, I mean, that shouldn't be too hard, should it?
So just, Josh, in general, I guess, a listing of their current infrastructure, what they're doing with that, and potentially what they're either currently working on or in the near future plan to advance. Okay, that sounds good. Yes, Senator Bonner.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's wise, and we don't need to build to study the interaction when we just ask them. We can just study it at the next meeting. And I think it is important to acknowledge the way, so, moving forward, as Representative Clausen said, we now have capability for 4-year degrees at community colleges. That has to be part of the discussion. It's going to require a shift in thought from people throughout the state, and I think it's okay to begin those conversations next month.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so everything down on that? Okay. Committee members, anything further need to be discussed, brought forward before we adjourn and go to lunch?
I think we're going on a tour first.
Oh, we're doing tour first?
Yeah, we should have a schedule of this.
Okay.
I'm assuming Mayor or somebody will.
All right. So what's
Mr.
next?
Chairman, I'm going to actually ask Ann Leonard to join me, and she will walk you through the plans. Yesterday, we were late. Today, we are early. So we're trying to do a little bit of this on the fly, but Ann is prepared. And I think the buses are out there.
Yeah. So the plan is we have a bus outside to take all of you both for a brief tour of our facilities on campus, which we call Old Ag C, and the new building. Take you out to the Hanson Arena, where our Meat Science Club, Food Science Club, is going to give you an awesome lunch that's beef, of course, and then a brief tour of the Laramie R&E Center. We will have UW cars out there, so in case some of the committee needs to come back to campus, we will be happy to give you a ride back here. That way, we're not all caravanning out there. So if you want to take like a 10-minute break and then load onto the bus, we will proceed.
All right, that sounds good. Thank you very much. Well, committee, I guess we got a few minutes to, before we depart, but if there is no further business that anyone needs to bring forward, we are adjourned. Oh, and quick housekeeping, make sure everybody gets their travel vouchers in so we can sign them, and don't forget all your stuff. Thank you.